Birthdays are supposed to be special, a day when you feel like the center of the universe, even if just for a moment. Mine started off that way. I woke up to the smell of fresh coffee and the faint sound of Sophia humming in the kitchen. It wasn't unusual for her to hum while cooking. She'd always done that, especially when she was in a good mood. "Happy birthday, handsome," she said, leaning over to kiss me as I walked into the kitchen. She was making my favorite, pancakes with strawberries and whipped cream. Her hair was tied back, and she wore an apron that had flour smudges on it, which made her look effortlessly beautiful. "Looks like I'm in for a good day," I said, smiling as I wrapped my arms around her. She laughed. "You deserve it." Sophia had been planning a surprise party for weeks, or so I thought. She wasn't the best at keeping secrets, and I'd caught her whispering on the phone to friends or sneaking notes into her purse. I played along, pretending not to notice, enjoying the thought that she was putting so much effort into making me feel loved. Our marriage hadn't always been easy, but we'd weathered every storm together. Or so I believed. We met in college, fell in love hard and fast, and built a life I was proud of. Sure, there were bumps along the way, like any marriage, but I thought we had something unbreakable. After breakfast, I left the house with a spring in my step. Sophia kissed me goodbye, her lips lingering on mine just long enough to make me feel like the luckiest man alive. "I'll see you tonight," she said, her eyes sparkling. "I can't wait," I replied, already imagining the celebration she'd planned. The day flew by in a blur of calls and meetings. My colleagues at work surprised me with a cake, and Marcus, my best friend, insisted on taking me out for a drink before the evening festivities. Everything felt perfect, until I realized I'd forgotten my wallet at home. It wasn't a big deal, really, but I needed it for the rest of the day. "I'll swing by the house and grab it," I told Marcus. "Meet you at the bar in half an hour." "Don't let the missus spoil you too much," he teased. I laughed, shaking my head. She's already outdone herself. The drive home felt routine, the streets and turns familiar. I didn't expect anything out of the ordinary. Why would I? It was my birthday, and I was on top of the world. When I pulled into the driveway, I noticed a sleek black car parked out front. I frowned. It wasn't a car I recognized, but Sophia had mentioned deliveries for the party. Maybe it was the caterer or someone dropping off decorations. I walked up the front steps, keys jingling in my hand. The house was quiet, too quiet for someone who was supposed to be preparing for a celebration. As I stepped inside, I called out, "Sophia? You here?" No answer. The silence unnerved me. I set my briefcase down by the door and made my way toward the kitchen, where I assumed she'd be. The smell of something baking lingered in the air, but it wasn't the comforting aroma of a birthday treat. Instead, it felt off, like the scene of a play before the curtain rises. That's when I heard it. Laughter. A man's voice, deep and unfamiliar, followed by Sophia's unmistakable giggle. It wasn't the casual laugh she shared with friends or the hearty one she saved for my bad jokes. It was softer, more intimate. I froze for a moment, my heart pounding in my chest. I thought about calling out again, but decided against it. Instead, I moved quietly toward the kitchen, my footsteps light on the hardwood floor. When I reached the doorway, I saw them. Sophia and a man I'd never met before. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and impeccably dressed in a tailored suit. They were standing close, too close. His hand rested on her waist, and before I could process what I was seeing, he leaned in and kissed her. Not a friendly peck, not an innocent gesture. A real kiss. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. My body reacted before my mind could catch up, my hands balling into fists at my sides. "What the hell is going on here?" I said, my voice low and sharp. They both jumped, pulling apart as if they'd been caught committing a crime. Which, in a way, they had. Sophia's face turned pale, her eyes wide with panic. The man, David, as I would later learn, simply turned to me, his expression calm, almost amused. "It's nothing," he said, shrugging. "It's just a kiss." I stared at him, disbelief turning into rage. Just a kiss? Did he think that made it okay? That it somehow lessened the betrayal unfolding before my eyes? Before I could stop myself, I lunged at him. My fist connected with his jaw, the impact reverberating up my arm. He staggered back, clutching his face. But I wasn't done. Not yet. I didn't stop to think after my fist connected with his jaw. The sound of the impact echoed through the kitchen, followed by a guttural groan from the man, David, as I'd later learn. He stumbled back, clutching his face, his once smug demeanor replaced by shock and pain. Sophia screamed, her voice sharp and panicked. "Nathan, stop!" But I wasn't listening. I wasn't thinking. Rage had taken over, a primal need to make him pay for his audacity, for standing in my kitchen, in my home, kissing my wife. David tried to steady himself, his hand still pressed against his jaw. "You're crazy, man," he spat, his words slurred. "It was just a kiss." "Just a kiss?" I snarled, stepping toward him. "In my house? On my birthday? You think I'm going to let you walk out of here after this?" Sophia stepped between us, her arms outstretched, trying to create distance. "Nathan, please stop. He's hurt." Good, I thought bitterly. He deserved worse. David, clearly realizing he was outmatched, started edging toward the door. "I'm not dealing with this," he muttered. "You've got anger issues, man." "Get out," I growled, my voice low and menacing. "And don't ever come back." He didn't need to be told twice. He bolted out of the kitchen, nearly tripping over his own feet. I heard the front door slam behind him, the sound punctuating his cowardly retreat. As soon as he was gone, the adrenaline began to drain from my body, leaving me shaking and exhausted. Sophia stood frozen in front of me, her face pale, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Nathan," she began, her voice trembling. "I can explain." "Explain?" I barked, my anger reigniting. "What exactly is there to explain, Sophia? I just walked in on you kissing another man in our kitchen, on my birthday." She flinched at the venom in my voice, but I didn't care. I needed answers. I needed to understand how the woman I loved could betray me like this. "It wasn't what it looked like," she said weakly. I laughed bitterly. "Not what it looked like? Really? Because from where I was standing, it looked like you were cheating on me with some guy in a suit. Who is he, Sophia? Your coworker? Your boss?" She hesitated, and that pause was all the confirmation I needed. "He's my boss," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I stared at her, the weight of her confession sinking in. My wife, the woman I had shared my life with for 8 years, had been kissing her boss in our kitchen. The betrayal cut deeper than I thought possible. "How long?" I demanded, my voice cold. "What? How long has this been going on, Sophia?" "It's not like that," she said quickly, tears streaming down her face. "This was the first time, I swear. It just happened, Nathan. I didn't mean for it to happen." "Didn't mean for it to happen?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You expect me to believe that this was just some spur-of-the-moment thing? That you just accidentally fell into his arms?" She sobbed harder, her hands covering her face. "I don't know what to say. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Her apologies felt hollow, like empty words spoken out of desperation. I couldn't even look at her. The woman standing before me felt like a stranger, someone I didn't recognize. Without another word, I turned and walked out of the kitchen. "Nathan, wait," she called after me, but I didn't stop. I grabbed my car keys from the table near the front door and stepped outside, slamming the door behind me. I needed air. I needed to get away from her, from the house, from everything. My hands were shaking as I gripped the steering wheel, my mind racing with a mix of anger, disbelief, and heartbreak. How had it come to this? Just hours ago, I'd thought my life was perfect. I'd woken up feeling loved and cherished, excited to celebrate another year with the woman I adored. And now, everything was in shambles. I drove aimlessly, the streets blurring past as I tried to make sense of what had just happened. Memories of Sophia flooded my mind. Her laughter, her smile, the way she used to look at me with love and admiration. I had thought we were happy, that our marriage was solid. But now, all of that felt like a lie. Eventually, I pulled into an empty parking lot and turned off the engine. The silence was deafening, broken only by the sound of my ragged breathing. I rested my forehead against the steering wheel, my chest heaving as the reality of the situation hit me like a freight train. Sophia had betrayed me. On my birthday, no less. And the worst part? I wasn't sure what hurt more. The betrayal itself, or the fact that she'd kissed him in our home, the one place that was supposed to be a sanctuary. As I sat there, staring out at the darkened parking lot, one thought consumed me. I couldn't go back to pretending everything was okay. This wasn't something I could sweep under the rug. Sophia had broken my trust, and I wasn't sure it could ever be repaired. I stayed in that parking lot for what felt like hours, staring into the void as the events of the day replayed in my head. My mind swung wildly between disbelief, anger, and heartbreak. Sophia's voice echoed in my ears, her weak attempts to explain, her desperate apologies. None of it mattered. The image of her locked in that kiss with David was burned into my mind, and no amount of words could erase it. Eventually, I decided to go back home. I didn't want to, but I had to. It was my house, after all. And if Sophia had the audacity to bring her boss there, I wasn't about to let her drive me away from the one place I should feel safe. When I pulled into the driveway, her car was still there. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for whatever confrontation awaited me inside. The house was quiet when I entered. Too quiet. The kitchen lights were off, and the smell of whatever she'd been baking earlier still lingered in the air, now sickeningly sweet. I walked through the living room and found her sitting on the couch, her knees pulled up to her chest. She looked up when she heard me, her face streaked with tears. "Nathan," she said softly, her voice breaking. I ignored her and headed toward the stairs, determined to avoid another conversation. "Please," she called after me. "Just listen to me. I need to explain." I stopped at the base of the stairs, my hand gripping the banister. Slowly, I turned to face her. "Explain? What exactly do you think you can say to fix this, Sophia? Because I'd love to hear it." She stood, her movements hesitant, as if she were afraid to get too close. "It was a mistake," she said, her voice trembling. "I swear, Nathan, it didn't mean anything. It just happened." "It just happened?" I repeated, my tone cold. "So what, you accidentally tripped and fell into his arms? That's the best you've got?" She flinched at my sarcasm, but I didn't care. My patience was gone. "It was one kiss," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've never done anything like this before." I promise I laughed bitterly. "One kiss, right, and I'm supposed to believe that, am I?" "It's the truth," she insisted, tears streaming down her face again. "I love you, Nathan. I made a terrible mistake, but I love you. Please don't let this ruin us." Her words stung more than they should have. A part of me wanted to believe her, to cling to the possibility that this was just a momentary lapse in judgment. But the anger in me refused to let go. "Who is he?" I asked finally. She hesitated, and for a moment I thought she wasn't going to answer. But then she said, "David, my boss." "Your boss," I said, my voice dripping with disdain. "The man you've been working late with, taking calls from, and spending extra hours at the office for. That boss?" She nodded, unable to meet my eyes. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Everything made sense now. The late nights, the unexplained phone calls, the times she'd seemed distracted or distant. How long had this been going on? How many lies had she told me to cover her tracks? How long? I demanded. Her head shot up, her eyes wide with panic. Nathan, it's not what you think. How long, Sophia? I snapped, cutting her off. It wasn't an affair, she said quickly. I swear it wasn't. This was the first time anything happened. I stared at her, trying to gauge whether she was telling the truth. But how could I trust her now? She'd already proven she was capable of lying to me. Do you have any idea what you've done? I asked, my voice quieter now, but no less intense. You didn't just betray me. You humiliated me. You brought him into our house, Sophia. Into our kitchen. On my birthday. She broke down then, sobbing uncontrollably. I'm so sorry, she choked out. I hate myself for what I've done. Please, Nathan, give me a chance to make this right. I shook my head, the weight of her betrayal pressing down on me. I don't know if that's possible, I said. Her sobs grew louder as I turned and walked away, heading upstairs to our bedroom. Once inside, I locked the door and sank onto the edge of the bed. My head was pounding and my chest felt tight, like I could barely breathe. I glanced around the room, my eyes landing on the framed photos of us that lined the walls and dresser. Each one felt like a cruel reminder of what we used to have, and what we might never have again. I grabbed my phone and texted Marcus. Me. Can we meet? I need to talk. He responded almost immediately. Marcus. Of course. Where? I gave him the address of a bar not far from the house, desperate for an escape. Before I left, I grabbed a small suitcase and threw in some clothes. I couldn't stay here. Not tonight. Not with her. As I carried the bag down the stairs, Sophia stood at the bottom, her face a mixture of heartbreak and desperation. Where are you going? She asked, her voice barely audible. I need space, I said simply. She reached for my arm, but I pulled away. Nathan, please don't do this, she begged. This isn't me doing anything, I replied, my voice firm. This is you, Sophia. You did this. I walked out the door without looking back. The night air was cold as I stepped out of the house, my suitcase in one hand and my phone in the other. My heart felt heavy, my mind racing with questions I couldn't answer. How had it come to this? How had the woman I'd shared so much with, the woman I thought I knew better than anyone, betrayed me so completely? I got into my car, gripping the steering wheel tightly, and drove to the bar where Marcus was waiting. The drive felt endless, the silence in the car deafening. I kept replaying the moment I walked into the kitchen and saw her with him. David. His smug, casual dismissal of their kiss haunted me. It's nothing. It's just a kiss. When I arrived, Marcus was already there, sitting in a booth with a couple of beers on the table. He looked up as I approached, concern etched on his face. You okay, man? He asked, though the answer was obvious. I dropped into the seat across from him, running a hand through my hair. No, I said bluntly. Not even close. What happened? He asked, leaning forward. I took a deep breath and told him everything. The kiss, David's arrogance, Sophia's panicked apologies. As I spoke, the emotions I'd been suppressing came flooding back. Anger, humiliation, heartbreak. By the time I finished, my hands were shaking and my voice was raw. Marcus let out a low whistle. Damn, he said. That's rough, man. I don't even know what to say. I don't know what to do, I admitted. Do I confront her again? Do I try to fix this, or do I just walk away? He shook his head. You need to figure out what you want. If you think there's a chance to salvage things, that's up to you. But if you can't trust her anymore, well, that's a whole different story. Trust. The word hit me like a punch to the gut. How could I ever trust her again after what I'd seen? We talked for hours, Marcus doing his best to offer advice and support, though even he admitted there were no easy answers. By the time I left the bar, it was nearly midnight, and I was no closer to figuring out my next move. I checked into a small hotel for the night, not ready to go back home. The room was quiet, almost eerily so, and the loneliness hit me hard. I thought about calling Sophia, but what would I even say? Instead, I lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, as memories of our life together played in my mind. Our first date. The day I proposed. The way she used to look at me, like I was the only man in the world. When had that changed? And why hadn't I seen it? The next morning, I woke up feeling no better than I had the night before. I checked my phone and saw a string of missed calls and texts from Sophia. Sophia. Nathan, please come home. Sophia. I need to talk to you. Sophia. I'm so sorry, I love you. I deleted the messages without responding. Later that day, I called Gloria, our housekeeper, who had been with us for years. If anyone knew what had been going on behind my back, it was her. Gloria, it's Nathan, I said when she answered. Mr. Nathan, she said, sounding surprised. Is everything okay? I hesitated. Not really. Listen, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Of course, she said, her tone cautious. Have you noticed anything strange between Sophia and her boss? David? There was a pause, and I could almost hear the wheels turning in her head. I don't want to get involved, sir, she said finally. Gloria, please, I said, my voice breaking. I need to know the truth. She sighed. I've seen him at the house a couple of times when you weren't home, she admitted. They always said they were working on something for her job, but, well, it didn't seem right. Her words hit me like a blow to the chest. It wasn't just a kiss. There had been other moments, other times when she had betrayed my trust. Thank you, Gloria, I said, my voice tight. That's all I needed to know. I hung up the phone and sat in silence, my mind racing. Sophia had lied to me, repeatedly. And for what? For him? For a man who didn't even respect her enough to defend her when I caught them in the act? The anger I'd felt before returned, stronger than ever. But this time, it wasn't just directed at Sophia. It was also directed at myself, for being blind, for trusting her, for letting this happen under my nose. I called Marcus again, filling him in on what Gloria had told me. She's been lying to me for months, I said, my voice shaking. Sounds like it, he said. So what are you going to do? I don't know, I admitted. But I can't just let this slide. He was quiet for a moment. Whatever you decide, just make sure it's what you want, not what your anger wants. Don't let them take any more from you than they already have. His words stuck with me as I hung up. I wasn't ready to forgive Sophia. I wasn't even sure if I could. But one thing was certain. I wasn't going to let her or David off the hook. Not yet. The anger that burned in my chest wasn't something I could simply suppress. It demanded action, a need to know the full extent of what had been happening behind my back. Gloria's words kept replaying in my mind. I've seen him at the house a couple of times when you weren't home. That wasn't an accident. It wasn't just one kiss. There had to be more, and I was going to find out. I started my search the only way I knew how, through Sophia's phone records. She hadn't deleted her old bills, and I still had access to the shared online account. As I combed through the call logs, a pattern began to emerge. Frequent calls to a number I didn't recognize. David's number. There were dozens of calls over the past few months. Late at night, during my business trips, even on weekends when she'd told me she was out with friends. Each call felt like another crack in the foundation of everything I thought we'd built together. But I needed more than call logs. I needed hard evidence. I reached out to an old college friend, Ethan, who worked as a private investigator. Ethan wasn't someone I'd stayed in touch with regularly, but I knew he'd help me if I asked. Ethan, I need your help, I said when I called him. What's going on? He asked. I hesitated for a moment before telling him everything. The kiss, the lies, the phone calls. He listened without interrupting, his voice calm and professional when he finally spoke. All right, he said. I'll look into it. Give me his name and anything else you've got. I sent him David's full name, workplace, and phone number, along with the times I knew he'd been at the house. Ethan promised to start digging immediately. While Ethan worked on his end, I couldn't help but start my own investigation. I remembered Sophia's laptop sitting on her desk at home, often left unlocked. That evening, when I returned to grab a few things, I sat down at her desk and opened the lid. Her email was still logged in. I hesitated for a moment, my stomach twisting with guilt, but then I remembered the look on her face when I caught her kissing him, the lies she'd told me afterward. Whatever guilt I felt quickly evaporated. As I scrolled through her inbox, I found several emails from David. Most were work-related, at least on the surface, but the tone of some felt off, too friendly, too familiar. And then I found it. An email with the subject line, "Last night," caught my eye. My hands trembled as I clicked on it, and I read the words that confirmed everything I'd feared. I can't stop thinking about you. Last night was incredible. Can't wait to see you again. The email was dated 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks. While I was out of town for work, they'd been together, and from the sound of it, it wasn't their first time. I felt a surge of rage so intense it made my vision blur. I slammed the laptop shut, my heart pounding in my chest. It wasn't just a kiss. It wasn't just a mistake. This had been going on for months. Lies stacked upon lies. The next morning, Ethan called me with his findings. "I've been following David for a few days," he said. "He's not exactly discreet. I've got pictures of him meeting Sophia at a cafe near her office, and I've spoken to a couple of people who work with them. Apparently their closeness has been the subject of gossip for a while now." Gossip. My wife had been the subject of office gossip, and I'd been blissfully unaware. "There's more," Ethan continued. "David's got a history. He's been involved with at least 2 other employees at different companies, both of whom ended up leaving their jobs after things went south. And his marriage? Barely holding on by a thread. His wife, Laura, probably has no idea what he's been up to." "Send me everything," I said, my voice cold. By the end of the day, I had a folder filled with evidence. Emails, photos, witness statements. It was more than enough to confront Sophia and expose David for the predator he was. But I wasn't ready to act just yet. I needed time to process everything, to figure out what I wanted to do next. Marcus, ever the voice of reason, reminded me to think carefully before making any decisions. "You've got the upper hand now," he said. "Don't do anything rash. Use this to your advantage." He was right, of course. As much as I wanted to storm into David's office and punch him again, I knew that wasn't the answer. I needed to be smarter than that. That evening, as I sat in the quiet of my hotel room, I realized something. I wasn't just angry at Sophia and David anymore. I was angry at myself for being blind, for trusting too easily, for letting my marriage deteriorate without noticing the signs. But that anger also gave me clarity. I wasn't just going to confront them. I was going to take control. The moment I decided to confront Sophia, a calm I hadn't felt in days washed over me. It wasn't the calm of forgiveness or understanding, far from it. It was the clarity of knowing exactly what I needed to do. The evidence Ethan had gathered left no room for doubt, no space for excuses. I wasn't walking into this conversation to hear her lies. I was walking in to tell her the truth I'd uncovered, and the truth about what was going to happen next. I called her and told her to meet me at home. My voice was cold, clipped, leaving no room for negotiation. She must have sensed the shift in me because she didn't argue or ask questions. When I arrived, her car was already in the driveway. I parked next to it and sat in the car for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. The house loomed in front of me, no longer the sanctuary it had once been. It felt tainted now, a monument to betrayal. I stepped out of the car and walked inside. Sophia was sitting on the couch, her hands wringing nervously in her lap. When she saw me, she stood, her eyes wide with apprehension. Nathan, she began, her voice trembling. Thank you for coming home. Sit down, I interrupted, my tone sharp. She flinched but obeyed, sinking back onto the couch. I sat in the armchair across from her, placing the folder of evidence on the coffee table between us. I've been busy, I said, gesturing to the folder. While you've been leaving me voicemails, begging for forgiveness, I've been uncovering the truth. Her eyes darted to the folder, then back to me. What truth? She asked hesitantly. Don't play dumb, Sophia. You know exactly what I'm talking about. I opened the folder and slid a photo across the table. A picture of her and David at a cafe, leaning in close, their body language unmistakable, her face drained of color. Nathan, it's not what it looks like, she stammered. Really? I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Because it looks exactly like what I walked in on in our kitchen. She opened her mouth to respond, but I didn't let her. And it doesn't stop there, I continued, pulling out the email Ethan had recovered. I read it aloud, each word cutting through the room like a knife. I can't stop thinking about you. Last night was incredible. Can't wait to see you again. Tears filled her eyes, spilling down her cheeks. Nathan, please, let me explain, she pleaded. Oh, I'd love to hear your explanation, I said, leaning back in my chair. Go ahead. Tell me how this isn't what it looks like. Tell me how you weren't lying to me for months while sneaking around with him. I'm all ears. She sobbed, her words tumbling out in a frantic rush. It wasn't supposed to happen. He started flirting with me at work, and I was flattered. I didn't mean for it to go this far, Nathan. I swear I never wanted to hurt you. Flattered? I repeated, my voice rising. That's your excuse? You were flattered, so you threw away 8 years of marriage for him? I was stupid, she cried. I didn't think. I let it get out of control, but it didn't mean anything. I love you, Nathan. Only you. I laughed bitterly. Love? Don't talk to me about love, Sophia. Love doesn't lie. Love doesn't cheat. Love doesn't bring another man into our home and kiss him in our kitchen on my birthday. She buried her face in her hands, her sobs muffled. I'm sorry, she whispered. Sorry doesn't cut it, I said firmly. You didn't just betray me, you disrespected me, you humiliated me, and you think a few tears and an apology will make it better? Her shoulders shook as she cried harder, but I felt no sympathy. You need to pack your things, I said after a long silence. You're leaving. She looked up at me, her eyes wide with disbelief. What? You heard me, I said. This marriage is over. I've already spoken to a lawyer. You'll be hearing from her soon. Nathan, please, she begged, sliding off the couch and onto her knees in front of me. Don't do this. We can fix this. I'll quit my job. I'll do whatever it takes. Just don't give up on us. I stared at her, the woman I had once loved more than anything in the world. But the love I'd felt was buried now, smothered by anger and betrayal. You gave up on us the moment you chose him, I said, my voice cold. Her sobs filled the room as I stood and walked away. I didn't look back. I couldn't. As I left the house, a strange sense of relief washed over me. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like I was taking control. But I wasn't done yet. David still needed to face the consequences of what he'd done. After leaving Sophia in a crumpled heap of apologies and tears, I turned my focus to David. He wasn't going to walk away from this unscathed. He'd treated my marriage and my life with utter disregard, waltzing into my home and disrespecting me without a second thought. It wasn't enough that I had broken his jaw. He needed to face the full weight of what he had done. The evidence Ethan had gathered was a gold mine, and I intended to use it to dismantle David's life piece by piece. He wasn't just a man who had seduced my wife. He was a serial predator, using his position of power to manipulate women. It was time to expose him. The first thing I did was contact David's HR department. Ethan had provided me with accounts from two of his former employees, women who had left their jobs because of his inappropriate behavior. They were hesitant to come forward, fearing retaliation, but I assured them that I'd protect their identities. I sent an anonymous email to the HR director, attaching the accounts, photos, and emails I'd collected. I laid it all out: David's predatory behavior, his inappropriate relationships with subordinates, and the toxic work environment he'd cultivated. Within a week, David was called into a meeting with the HR team and senior executives. Ethan, who had eyes on the office, reported back to me. "They suspended him," Ethan said, "pending an investigation." I smiled. That was step one. Next, I turned my attention to David's wife, Laura. From what Ethan had uncovered, she was blissfully unaware of her husband's extracurricular activities. I wrestled with whether or not to involve her. It felt cruel to drag another innocent person into this mess. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that Laura deserved to know the truth. I contacted her anonymously, sending her a letter along with the evidence I had gathered. I kept the tone neutral, stating only that I thought she should be aware of her husband's actions. A few days later, I got a call from Ethan. "She threw him out," he said. "Apparently, she found more on his phone after you sent the letter. Texts, photos, the works. She's filing for divorce." I didn't feel joy at her pain, but I felt vindicated. David's perfect life was crumbling, just as he tried to destroy mine. For the final blow, I turned to social media. Using a throwaway account, I posted screenshots of David's inappropriate emails and photos of him with Sophia and other women. I didn't include names or identifiable details for the women involved, only David's name and actions. The post went viral almost immediately. Comments poured in, people condemning him and sharing stories of similar experiences with men in power. The scandal made its way to local news outlets, and soon David's name was tarnished beyond repair. It didn't take long for David's world to implode. He lost his job, his marriage, and his reputation. His once charismatic presence was reduced to whispers of shame. One afternoon, I saw him for the first time since the night in the kitchen. He was sitting alone on a bench outside a coffee shop, his arms still in a sling from the broken jaw I'd given him. He looked disheveled, his once expensive suit wrinkled and ill-fitting. I debated whether to approach him. Part of me wanted to rub his downfall in his face, but another part of me felt nothing but pity. He'd destroyed himself. I walked past him without saying a word. He didn't look up, and I didn't stop. Later that evening, I met Marcus for a drink. He raised his glass to me as I sat down. "Cheers to justice," he said. I smirked. "Cheers." We clinked glasses, the sound crisp and satisfying. "Was it worth it?" he asked after a moment. I thought about it. Was it worth it? David had been exposed, humiliated, and stripped of everything he'd held dear. Sophia was left to grapple with the wreckage of our marriage. I'd taken control of the situation, ensuring that neither of them would walk away unscathed. "Yes," I said finally. "It was worth it." Marcus nodded. "Good. Now it's time to focus on you. What's next?" I didn't have an answer for him. Not yet. But I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to let this define me. David's reckoning marked the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of closure. The anger that had consumed me began to fade, replaced by a quiet determination to rebuild my life. Sophia still tried to contact me, leaving voicemails and sending emails filled with apologies and promises to change. But I didn't respond. My focus was no longer on her or David. It was on me. The days following David's downfall were quieter, but not in the comforting way they once were. The silence of the house was heavy, a constant reminder of what had been lost. I had no intention of reaching out to Sophia, but that didn't stop her from trying. She called and texted relentlessly, leaving messages that ranged from desperate apologies to tearful confessions. At first, I ignored them all. But one day, curiosity got the better of me. I played one of her voicemails. "Nathan," her voice cracked with emotion. "I know you hate me, and I don't blame you. But please, just listen. I've resigned from my job. I couldn't stay there. Not after everything. I'm going to therapy. I'm trying to figure out why I did what I did, and how I let myself hurt the person I love the most. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I needed you to know I'm trying. For you. For us. For myself." Her words hung in the air long after the voicemail ended. I didn't feel pity or forgiveness, but I did feel something. Maybe a flicker of curiosity. Over the next few weeks, Sophia sent me updates about her progress. She emailed me copies of her resignation letter and messages from her therapist confirming her appointments. She wrote long letters reflecting on her mistakes and the choices that had led to her betrayal. One letter stood out. "Nathan, I know I can't undo what I've done. I broke your trust, and I broke us. I've spent every day since that night thinking about the ways I failed you and failed myself. I've realized that part of the reason I let things with David happen was because I was insecure. I felt small next to you, watching you thrive in your career while I struggled to find purpose in mine. But instead of talking to you about it, I let my weakness consume me. It doesn't excuse what I did, nothing ever could, but I want you to know I see it now. I still love you, Nathan, and I always will. But if I never get another chance with you, I'll understand. Just know that I'm going to keep working on myself, whether you're in my life or not." Sophia. Reading her words stirred something in me. Not forgiveness, not yet, but maybe the smallest seed of empathy. After weeks of silence, I agreed to meet her. We chose a neutral location, a quiet cafe where no one would recognize us. She looked different when I arrived, thinner, paler, and wearing no makeup, as if she didn't have the energy to maintain her usual polished appearance. "Nathan," she said softly when I sat down across from her. I nodded, my face neutral. "Sophia." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she took a deep breath and said, "Thank you for meeting me. I wasn't sure you would." "Why did you want to meet?" I asked, cutting straight to the point. She hesitated, then said, "I needed to look you in the eyes and tell you how sorry I am. Not through a voicemail or a letter, but face to face." Her voice trembled, but she pressed on. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I betrayed you in the worst way possible, and I'll carry that guilt for the rest of my life. But I need you to know that I'm trying to be better. For myself, and because you deserve better than the person I was." I watched her carefully, searching her face for any signs of manipulation or insincerity. But all I saw was a broken woman who was trying, in her own way, to put herself back together. "What do you want from me, Sophia?" I asked finally. "Nothing," she said, her voice barely audible. "I don't expect anything from you. I just needed you to know that I'm sorry and that I'm working on myself." I nodded slowly, not trusting myself to speak. That night, I found myself thinking about Sophia more than I had in weeks. Not about her betrayal, but about the woman she used to be. The woman I fell in love with. Was it possible for her to become that woman again? Or was the damage too deep? Marcus called me that evening, checking in like he always did. "How was the meeting?" he asked. "Hard," I admitted. "But I think she's trying, Marcus. Really trying." "Do you think you can forgive her?" he asked. I didn't answer right away. "I don't know," I said finally. "Maybe, but not now, not yet." In the weeks that followed, Sophia continued her efforts to change. She moved out of our house and into a small apartment, working part-time while focusing on her therapy. She didn't contact me as often, but when she did, her updates were thoughtful and honest. For the first time, I saw her taking responsibility for her actions, not just to win me back, but because she genuinely wanted to grow. It was a small comfort, but it was a start. I didn't forgive Sophia overnight. It was a process, a battle between my anger and the love I once had for her. But as time passed, I realized that holding on to my anger wasn't serving me anymore. One evening, I sat down and wrote her a letter. Sophia, I've seen the work you're doing, and I respect it. I don't know if I'll ever be able to trust you again, but I want you to know that I'm proud of you for taking responsibility and making changes. For now, I need space to continue healing on my own. Take care of yourself. Nathan. I didn't know where the road would lead us, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was on the right path. The days stretched into weeks, and life began to take on a new rhythm. It wasn't the same as before. How could it be? But it was steady. I focused on myself, my work, and rediscovering who I was outside of the roles of husband and victim. Sophia's absence in the house was palpable, yet oddly liberating. There were no awkward silences, no lingering tension. Just me, and the quiet hum of a life I was slowly piecing back together. Still, she lingered in my thoughts, not as a constant ache, but as an unresolved question. Could I ever trust her again? Could I forgive her? Sophia, for her part, continued to stay in touch sparingly. Her updates were concise but meaningful, often sharing progress, from her therapy sessions or reflections on the choices she had made. She wasn't begging for reconciliation anymore, which made her words feel more genuine. One day, Marcus invited me over for a barbecue, insisting I needed to get out of the house and be around normal people for once. I hesitated at first, but I went, realizing I needed to rejoin the world. "Good to see you, man," Marcus said, handing me a beer. "You look less miserable." "Thanks," I replied dryly, though I knew he meant it kindly. As the afternoon went on, surrounded by friends and laughter, I felt something I hadn't in a long time: contentment. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Later that night, back home, I found myself scrolling through Sophia's messages. Her most recent one caught my attention. "Nathan, I'm learning to forgive myself. I know I hurt you, and I'll regret that forever. But I'm starting to see myself clearly for the first time in years. I hope you're healing too. You deserve that." Her words struck a chord. Forgiving myself. Healing. It was something I hadn't considered. I had spent so much time focused on what Sophia had done to me that I hadn't addressed the anger I harbored toward myself, for trusting her, for missing the signs, for feeling like I wasn't enough. That night, I sat down and wrote her another letter. "Sophia, I'm not ready to forgive you, but I'm starting to understand the value of letting go. Not for you, but for me. I'm moving forward, and I hope you are too. Wherever this road takes us, I wish you the best." I wasn't sure what the future held, whether we would ever reconcile, or if this was the final chapter in our story. But for the first time, I felt like I was standing at a crossroads with a clear head, ready to choose my own path forward. As time passed, the chaos and pain of Sophia's betrayal began to fade. It wasn't that I forgot what had happened. I could never forget. But I started to carry it differently. It became less of a wound and more of a scar, a part of my story but not the defining chapter. I sold the house. The memories it held, both good and bad, were too heavy to keep living with. I found a small apartment downtown, nothing fancy, just enough for me. It felt like a fresh start, a blank slate where I could rebuild myself without the shadow of the past looming over me. Work became my anchor. I threw myself into it, not out of avoidance, but because it reminded me of my capabilities, my value. I started running in the mornings and picked up an old guitar I hadn't touched in years. Little by little, I began to reclaim pieces of myself that I'd lost somewhere along the way. Sophia and I spoke less frequently as the months went on. Her messages became sporadic, short updates about her life and progress. She told me she had started volunteering at a local shelter and that therapy was helping her unpack not just the betrayal, but the reasons behind it. She always ended her messages the same way. I hope you're doing well. And I was. One day, I ran into Marcus at a coffee shop. We sat down to catch up, and he grinned as he said, "You look good, man. Like, really good." "I feel good," I admitted. "Better than I have in a long time." "So, what's next?" he asked. I thought about his question. For so long, I had been consumed by the past, by the anger and heartbreak of what Sophia and David had done. But now, for the first time, I was looking forward. "I don't know," I said honestly, "but I'm ready to find out." As I walked back to my apartment, the city buzzing with life around me, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in months. The future was uncertain, yes, but it was mine. This wasn't the story of a man defined by betrayal. It was the story of a man who had endured it, learned from it, and come out stronger on the other side. I didn't know where the road ahead would lead, but I was ready to take the first step.
I gripped the steering wheel tight, my knuckles white against the cracked leather, as the snow whipped across the windshield in thick, blinding sheets. 8 hours. 8 damn hours I've been driving through this mess, all for her, for Camille. My wife. It was her birthday weekend, and she'd gone off to some cabin in the mountains with her girlfriends. I pictured it the whole way, her face lighting up, that little surprised gasp she makes when I do something unexpected, the way she'd throw her arms around me and call me her hero. I had a box of her favorite cake, chocolate with raspberry filling, sitting on the passenger seat, the edges a little smashed from the bumpy roads, but still perfect enough to make her smile. I'd always been the practical guy, not the romantic one she sometimes teased me about not being. But this was me trying. This was love, wasn't it? The storm didn't matter, the cold didn't matter, none of it did, as long as I could see her happy. The cabin came into view after what felt like forever, a little wooden thing tucked between pines, smoke curling from the chimney. I parked the truck, grabbed the cake box, and trudged through the snow, my boots sinking deep with every step. My jeans were soaked by the time I reached the door, but I didn't care. I could already hear her voice inside, that bright laugh of hers cutting through the muffled quiet of the storm. I didn't knock. Why would I? This was my moment. I pushed the door open, the warmth hitting my face, the cake box damp in my hands, and I stepped into the doorway. And then I froze. Camille was sitting there on the couch, a glass of wine in her hand, her head thrown back in laughter. Her friends were sprawled around her, Blair, Lena, a couple others I vaguely recognized, all giggling like they were in on some big secret. "God, I hope he crashes," Camille said, her voice sharp and casual, like she was talking about the weather. "I could use the insurance." Blair didn't even pause. She just smirked and said, for at least a few months of silence. The room erupted in laughter, loud and cruel, bouncing off the wooden walls. My chest tightened, like someone had punched me straight through the ribs. I stood there, snow dripping off my coat onto the floor, the cake box suddenly feeling heavy and stupid in my hands. They didn't see me at first. I could have backed out, could have pretended I hadn't heard it, but my feet wouldn't move. Camille's words kept echoing in my head. "I hope he crashes," and every laugh from her friends drove it deeper, like a knife twisting in. Finally, Blair glanced up, her eyes locking on mine, and her smirk faltered for half a second. "Oh," she said, and that's when Camille turned. Her face didn't light up. No gasp, no arms around me. Just a flicker of something, surprise, maybe annoyance, before she covered it with a tight little smile. "You're here," she said, like I'd interrupted something. I didn't say anything. What was there to say? My throat felt thick. My tongue stuck to the roof of my mouth. I walked past them, the cake box brushing against my wet jeans, and set it down on the kitchen counter with a soft thud. The room went quiet for a moment, but I didn't look back. I could feel their eyes on me, could hear the unspoken questions hanging in the air, but I didn't care. I turned and walked out, the door swinging shut behind me, the cold biting into my skin again. The snow soaked through my jeans even more as I trudged back to the truck, my breath coming out in ragged clouds. Rage boiled up inside me, hot and bitter, mixing with something else, grief, maybe, or just plain hurt. I climbed into the driver's seat, slammed the door, and stared at the cabin through the windshield. The lights glowed warm against the storm, like nothing had happened, like I hadn't just heard my wife wish me dead. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just sat there, letting the snow pile up on the hood, feeling it all melt together. The love I'd carried for 8 hours, the hope I'd pinned on that stupid cake, the life I thought we had. It was gone, buried under her words, under their laughter. I started the engine, the rumble loud in the silence, and pulled away. The storm swallowed the cabin behind me, and I let it. I didn't know where I was going, not yet, but I knew I wasn't coming back. Not to her. Not to that. 8 hours for silence, she'd get it now. The motel sign flickered in the dark, a buzzing red vacancy that looked like it had been hanging on by a thread for years. I pulled into the lot, the truck's tires crunching over gravel and slush, and killed the engine. The snowstorm was still raging outside, wind howling like it was trying to tear the world apart, but inside the cab, it was just me and the quiet. No radio, no phone buzzing, nothing but the sound of my own breathing and the faint creak of the cake box still sitting on the passenger seat. I didn't know why I hadn't thrown it out, maybe because it felt like the last piece of the man I'd been a few hours ago, the one who thought love was enough. Now it just stared back at me, a soggy reminder of how wrong I'd been. I grabbed my duffel from the back, left the cake where it was, and stepped out into the cold. The motel room was as cheap as it got: stained carpet, a bed that sagged in the middle, a heater that rattled like it was about to give up. No TV, no Wi-Fi, nothing to pull me out of my head. I dropped my bag by the door and sat on the edge of the mattress, my wet jeans sticking to my legs. Camille's voice kept playing on a loop in my mind. I hope he crashes. I could use the insurance. The way she'd said it, so easy, so light, like it was nothing, like I was nothing. And then Blair, with that few months of silence line, like they'd all been dreaming of a life without me. I rubbed my hands over my face, trying to scrub it away, but it stuck there, sharp and heavy. I pulled out my phone, the screen lighting up with a couple missed calls from her. Probably wondering where I'd gone, maybe even worried I'd actually crashed. I didn't listen to the voicemails. Didn't want to hear her voice, not now, maybe not ever. Instead, I went into my contacts and blocked her number. My thumb hovered over the screen for a second, but then I did it, no hesitation, no second thoughts. Then I scrolled to Blair's name and did the same. Lena, the quiet one, I left alone. She hadn't said anything, at least not that I'd heard. The rest of them, the giggling chorus, got the same treatment. One by one, I cut them out, my phone going silent for real. It felt good, like I was taking something back, even if it was just a little control. I need to talk to someone, though, someone who'd get it. Julian picked up on the second ring, his voice rough like I'd woken him up. Hey, man, you okay? He asked, and I could hear the concern even through the grogginess. I told him everything, the drive, the cake, what I'd walked in on. My voice stayed steady, but my hands were shaking by the time I got to her words. Julian didn't interrupt, just listened, and when I finished, he didn't say, "I told you so." He could have. He'd warned me about Camille years ago, back when we were still dating. Said she was different when I wasn't around, colder, sharper. I brushed it off, told him he didn't know her like I did. Turns out he knew her better. "You need a place to crash?" he asked, and I didn't even have to think about it. "Yeah," I said, "if it's not too much trouble." He told me the spare room was mine, no questions asked. I thanked him, hung up, and leaned back against the headboard, staring at the cracked ceiling. The motel room felt smaller now, the silence thicker, but it wasn't the kind she'd wanted. This was mine, chosen, not forced on me. I grabbed my laptop from the duffel, the one I'd thrown in last minute, and plugged it into the weak outlet by the bed. If Camille wanted a world without me, I'd give it to her starting now. I logged into our joint bank account first. Changed the password, something she'd never guess, my dad's old truck's license plate number. Then the shared email, the streaming accounts, the home security system I'd set up 2 years ago. One by one, I locked her out, my fingers moving fast across the keys. It wasn't about revenge, not yet, anyway. It was about disappearing, about giving her what she'd laughed about. Silence. No more texts asking where I put the spare batteries, no more calls about what I wanted for dinner. She'd have to figure it all out on her own now. I canceled the auto pay on the Wi-Fi too, just for good measure. Let her deal with the cable company, she always hated that. By the time I was done, it was past midnight, and the storm outside had slowed to a dull roar. I lay back on the bed, the springs creaking under me, and stared at the dark. My chest still hurt, that tight ache that wouldn't let go, but there was something else too, a strange kind of relief. I didn't have to pretend anymore, didn't have to keep chasing that version of her I'd built in my head. The one who loved me back. Maybe she never had. Julian's place was a couple hours away. I'd head there in the morning, start fresh. For now, I closed my eyes, letting the silence settle over me like a blanket. It wasn't peace, not yet, but it was a start. And it was mine. I woke up to the sound of the motel heater clanking like it was about to explode, my back stiff from the lumpy mattress. The room was dim, gray light sneaking through the thin curtains, and for a second, I forgot where I was. Then it hit me, Camille's laugh, her words, the cake still sitting in the truck. I sat up, rubbing my eyes, the ache in my chest flaring up again. My phone was dead silent. No notifications, no buzzing, just the way I'd left it after blocking her last night. She'd probably woken up by now, stumbled into the cabin's kitchen, and seen it. The cake box on the counter, untouched, the chocolate frosting melting into a sad puddle. I wondered what she'd thought when she realized I was gone. Did she care? Did she even notice? I shook my head, trying to push her out of my mind, and grabbed my keys. Julian's place was waiting, and I had work to do. The drive was quieter than yesterday, the storm finally dying down, leaving the roads slick and empty. I got to Julian's by mid-morning, his little house on the edge of town looking like a lifeline. He met me at the door, coffee in hand, and didn't ask too many questions, just handed me a mug and pointed me to the spare room. "Take your time," he said, and I nodded, grateful for the space. I dropped my duffel on the floor, plugged in my laptop, and got to work. Camille might have been waking up to that cake, but I was waking up to something else, reality. She'd called my office already, I found out later. Left a message with my assistant, something vague about checking in. Then my mom called me, her voice tight. "Camille said you didn't come home last night. What's going on?" I told her I was fine, just needed some time, and hung up before she could dig deeper. My ex-college roommate texted too. Camille had tracked him down somehow, asking if I'd crashed at his place. She was looking for me, but I wasn't ready to be found. I met Daniela Quinn, my lawyer, at a diner an hour later. She was sharp, no nonsense, the kind of woman who could scare you into telling the truth just by looking at you. I'd called her on the way to Julian's, told her I needed to talk about my options. She slid into the booth across from me, her notepad already open, and said, "Start from the beginning." So I did, the drive, the cake, what Camille said, how I'd walked out. Daniela didn't flinch, just scribbled notes, her pen moving fast. "You want a divorce?" she asked when I finished, straight to the point. I hesitated. Did I? Yesterday, I'd have said no. Today, I wasn't so sure. "I want to know what I'm dealing with first," I told her. She nodded, like she'd heard it 100 times before, and said she'd get me in touch with someone who could help. That someone was Leo, a forensic accountant Daniela swore by. We met him that afternoon in his cramped office, papers stacked everywhere, a coffee mug balanced on a pile of folders. He was younger than I expected, with a quick smile and a handshake that felt like he meant it. "Let's see what we've got," he said, pulling up a chair. I gave him access to everything, our joint accounts, my logins, the works. I'd already changed the passwords last night, but I hadn't dug into the details. Leo did. His fingers flew over the keyboard, pulling up statements, tracking transactions, muttering to himself as he went. I sat there, sipping bad coffee, watching the numbers roll across his screen. It didn't take long for his muttering to stop. "Well," he said, leaning back, "she's been busy." Turns out, Camille had been moving money for over a year. Small amounts at first, $50 here, $100 there, into a private savings account I didn't even know existed. Then it got bolder. $500 after I got that bonus last spring. $1,000 after we refinanced the house. Leo showed me the trail, clear as day, her name tied to every transfer. She wasn't subtle, he said, almost impressed. Most people try to hide it better. I stared at the screen, my stomach twisting. This wasn't just a cruel joke at the cabin. This was planned, deliberate. She'd been building something, a little nest egg, while I was out there buying cakes and thinking we were a team. "How much?" I asked, my voice rough. Leo tapped a few keys. "About 20 grand, give or take." 20 grand. I let that sink in, the diner coffee turning sour in my mouth. All those late nights I'd worked, all those times I'd told her we'd save up for a trip or a new car, she'd been siphoning it off, bit by bit. Daniela leaned over, scanning the numbers. "This changes things," she said. "If you go for divorce, this is leverage. Separate property, hidden assets, she's in trouble." I didn't say anything, just nodded. I wasn't ready to decide yet, but I needed to know more. "Keep digging," I told Leo. He grinned, like he lived for this kind of thing, and promised to call me if he found anything else. Back at Julian's, I sat on the spare bed, staring at the wall. Camille had no idea where I was, no idea I was onto her. She'd probably cut into that cake by now, maybe even laughed about me leaving it behind. But I wasn't the fool she thought I was not anymore. I'd stopped believing in the love story I'd told myself, the one where she was my partner, my everything. Now I was following the paper trail, and it was leading me somewhere dark. The cake might have been melting on that counter, but so was the life we built. And I wasn't going back to clean up the mess. I woke up at Julian's with the sun barely creeping over the horizon, the spare room still smelling faintly of old wood and dust. My phone was quiet, no calls, no texts, just the way I'd rigged it. Camille couldn't reach me, and that felt like a small victory, even if my head was still spinning from yesterday. Leo's numbers, 20 grand, siphoned off over a year, kept rolling through my mind, each digit a little stab of betrayal. I'd spent the night tossing on that creaky mattress, replaying her voice from the cabin, wondering how long she'd been laughing behind my back. But today wasn't about wallowing. Today was about figuring out what she'd do next, because I knew Camille, she wasn't the type to just let me vanish without a fight. I made coffee in Julian's kitchen, the pot gurgling while he shuffled in, still half asleep. "You look like hell," he said, grabbing a mug. I shrugged, sipping the bitter brew. "Feel like it too." He didn't push, just sat across from me, waiting. I told him about the money, about Leo and Daniela, about how Camille had been building her own little escape fund while I was out there playing the devoted husband. Julian's jaw tightened, but he didn't say much, just nodded, like he'd seen this coming. "She's probably freaking out by now," he said. No answers. I hoped so. I wanted her to feel lost, the way I'd felt standing in that doorway with the cake in my hands. She'd started her search, I found out later that morning. My assistant at work texted me Camille had called again, sounding flustered, asking if I'd been in. "Said you weren't answering your phone," the message read. "Told her you were out of town." "Good." Let her scramble. "My mom called too, her voice softer this time. She's saying you overreacted to something. Won't tell me what." "You sure you're okay?" I told her I was, kept it vague, and hung up quick. Then my old roommate from college chimed in, a guy I hadn't seen in years. "Your wife tracked me down on Facebook," his text said. "Asked if you were with me." "What's up?" She was casting a wide net, trying to pin me down, but I stayed off the map. By noon, I figured she'd have a story ready. Camille was good at that, spinning things, making herself the victim. Sure enough, Daniela called me later, her tone dry. "She's talking to people," she said. "Told her family you're emotionally unstable, that you stormed off over a misunderstanding. Told yours you've been acting off 4 weeks." I snorted, leaning back on Julian's couch. "A misunderstanding?" She wished me dead. Daniela didn't laugh. "She's building a narrative. Smart, in a way. Makes you the problem, not her." I hated how right that sounded. Camille could twist anything 8 years together, and I'd seen her charm her way out of fights, bills, promises she never kept. Now she was doing it to me. Then something unexpected happened. My phone pinged with a message, not a text, a DM, from an account I didn't recognize. No profile pic, just a string of numbers. "I'm sorry," it read. "I was there." I didn't laugh. "It's Lena." My stomach flipped. Lena, the quiet one from the cabin, the one who'd stayed out of the spotlight while Blair and Camille ran the show. I stared at the screen, unsure if I should reply. Another message came through before I could decide. "Blair eggs her on. Always has. Camille likes the attention." I should have said something. I sat there, coffee going cold in my hand, letting that sink in. Lena hadn't laughed, small comfort, but it was something. Then she dropped the real bomb. "She's joked about getting rid of you before. Last fall, after you signed that life insurance policy." I thought it was just talk. I put the phone down, my pulse thudding in my ears. Last fall. The policy. I'd gotten it after a scare at work. A guy in my department had a heart attack, left his wife with nothing. I wanted to make sure Camille was taken care of, just in case. She'd smiled when I told her, kissed my cheek, said I was sweet. Now Lena's words painted that memory black. Getting rid of me. Not a one-time slip at the cabin, but a theme, a running gag. I grabbed my laptop, pulled up the insurance docs I'd saved online. There it was, signed October 12th, $500,000 payout if I died. My hands shook as I scrolled through it, imagining her laughing over wine, picturing the check. I forwarded Lena's messages to Daniela, my fingers clumsy on the keys. "This changes things," I typed. She called me back in 10 minutes. "If this is true, it's not just divorce territory," she said, her voice low. "It's intent. We need more dates, witnesses. Can this Lena testify? I didn't know. I messaged her back. Can we talk? But she didn't reply. Maybe she'd already risked too much. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. Camille's story was out there now, painting me as the unstable one. But I had something too. Lena's words, Leo's numbers. Pieces of the truth. That night, I sat with Julian, a beer in my hand I barely touched. She's not just covering her ass, I said. She's been planning something. He nodded, slow. You think she meant it? The crash thing. I didn't know. Maybe it was just a yes. But the money, the insurance, the way she'd said it, it wasn't nothing. I'd spent years believing in her, ignoring the cracks. Now they were all I could see. Camille's story might have been loud, but mine was building quiet, steady, and I wasn't letting her rewrite it. I woke up early at Julian's, the house still dark, the kind of quiet that presses in on you. My head was heavy from too little sleep and too much thinking. Lena's messages, Camille's money, that damn insurance policy. It was 2 weeks since I'd walked out of the cabin, and today I was going back home. Not to stay, not to talk, just to get what was mine. Camille would be at work, her usual 9 to 5 at the boutique downtown, so the house would be empty. I didn't tell anyone, not even Julian. This was something I had to do alone. I grabbed my keys, threw on a jacket, and drove the hour back, the road familiar but strange now, like I was a ghost revisiting my own life. The house looked the same when I pulled up, red brick, white shutters, the mailbox I'd fixed last summer still leaning a little to the left. My key still worked, the lock clicking open with a sound that used to mean home. Now it just felt hollow. I stepped inside, the air stale, a faint whiff of her perfume lingering. The living room was untouched, couch pillows fluffed, TV remote on the coffee table, like she was pretending everything was fine. I didn't linger there. I headed upstairs, my boots loud on the hardwood, and went straight to our bedroom. My bedroom, once. The bed was made, her side perfect, mine still wrinkled from the last night I'd slept there. I grabbed a duffel from the closet and started packing photos of my dad from the dresser, my guitar from the corner, a stack of books she'd never cared about. Hemingway, Steinbeck, stuff she called boring when I'd read them out loud. They were mine, and I wasn't leaving them behind. I didn't touch her stuff, her jewelry box, her clothes, the little trinkets she'd collected over the years. Let her keep it all. I wasn't here to take everything, just what mattered. Downstairs, I stopped in the kitchen, and there it was, the cake. Half eaten now, the box open on the counter, a fork stuck in what was left of the chocolate and raspberry mess. She'd touched it, finally, after I'd gone. I stared at it, my chest tightening. Part of me wanted to smash it, fling it across the room, but I didn't. Instead, I pulled the spare apartment key from my pocket, the one I'd kept on my ring for emergencies, and set it down next to the box. No note, no explanation. She'd get the message. I wasn't done yet, though. I went to the basement, where I'd set up the smart system a couple years back. Lights, thermostat, security cameras, all tied to an app on my phone. I'd paid for it, installed it, kept it running. Not anymore. I flipped the breaker, shut it all down, then logged into the app and disconnected everything. The Wi-Fi was next. I called the provider from the landline, canceled the account effective immediately. She'd come home to a house that worked, sure. Lights would turn on, water would run. But the little conveniences I'd built? Gone. No more cloud backups of the cameras, no more remote access. She'd have to figure it out herself, like she'd have to figure out where I'd gone. I took one last look around, the duffel slung over my shoulder, the guitar case in my hand. The house felt bigger without me in it, emptier, like it had already moved on. I locked the door behind me, climbed into the truck, and drove away. The whole thing took less than an hour, but it felt like I'd cut a cord I'd been tangled in for years. Back at Julian's, I dropped my stuff in the spare room and sat on the bed, staring at the photos of my dad. He'd been a quiet guy, steady, the kind of man who'd have told me to walk away the second I heard her at the cabin. I wished I'd listened to that voice in me sooner, the one that sounded like him. Camille got home that night, I figured, and found the key, found the cake, found the silence I'd left her with. I didn't know what she'd do, call around again, maybe, or just sit there, staring at the mess. Part of me hoped she'd feel it, the weight of what she'd done, but I wasn't counting on it. She'd probably spin it to her friends, Blair especially, say I'd abandoned her, play the wounded wife. Let her. I had the truth, or at least pieces of it, and I wasn't giving her the chance to twist this one. That evening, I sat with Julian on his porch, the air cold but still, A beer in my hand, I actually drank this time. You think she'll come looking again? He asked, his voice low. I shrugged. Maybe. Doesn't matter. She won't find me here. He nodded, taking a sip of his own drink. You did good today, he said. Clean break. I wasn't so sure it was clean, messy as hell, more like, but it was a break. The house wasn't mine anymore, not really. It was hers now, key and all, and I was out. The cake, though, that stuck with me. She'd eaten it, taken a piece of what I'd brought her, and I wondered if it tasted like anything at all, or if it just sat there in her mouth, bitter and empty, like the life she'd wanted without me. I was at Julian's kitchen table, nursing a cup of coffee that had gone cold, when the knock came. 3 days had passed since I'd left the key and the cake at the house, and I'd started to think maybe Camille had given up looking. I was wrong. The knock was sharp, insistent, and before I could even stand, Julian peeked out the window and muttered, "It's her." My stomach dropped. I didn't want this. Not now, not here. But there she was, on his doorstep, her car parked crooked in the driveway like she'd rushed over. Julian looked at me, waiting for a signal. "Let her in," I said, my voice steady even though my hands weren't. He opened the door, and Camille stormed past him, her eyes wild, her hair a mess like she hadn't slept in days. She stopped when she saw me, standing there in the middle of the kitchen, and for a second, neither of us moved. She looked smaller than I remembered, pale, thinner, her coat hanging loose on her shoulders. "You're here," she said, like it was an accusation. I didn't answer, just watched her, letting the silence stretch out. That's when she started, first with the yelling. "What the hell is wrong with you? You just disappear, leave a key, shut everything off? Do you know how worried I've been?" Her voice cracked, loud and raw, bouncing off the walls. I didn't flinch. I'd heard her loud before, fights over money, over dumb stuff like whose turn it was to do dishes, but this was different. This was desperation. Then the crying came. She sank into a chair, hands covering her face, sobs shaking her whole body. "It was a joke," she said through the tears. "A stupid, awful joke. You were never supposed to hear it." I stood there, arms crossed, feeling the weight of her words, but not the pull I used to. She looked up at me, mascara streaking down her cheeks, and kept going. "I didn't mean it. I'd never want you to crash, never want you gone. It was just Blair. You know how she is, she says stuff, and I went along. I'm so sorry." Her voice broke again, and she reached for my hand, but I stepped back. I didn't want her touch, not now. She switched to pleading after that, her hands twisting together like she could wring the right words out of them. "Please, come home. We can fix this. I'll do anything, talk to someone, therapy, whatever you want. Just don't do this." Her eyes were wide, searching mine, but I didn't give her anything back. I'd spent years reading her, guessing what she needed, bending myself to fit her moods. Not anymore. I looked at her, really looked, and all I saw was the woman who'd laughed about me dying, who'd stashed money away, who'd built a life that didn't include me long before I walked out. "You got your silence," I said, my voice low, final. Then I turned, walked to the door, and closed it behind me. She didn't follow. I stood on Julian's porch, the cold biting into my skin, my breath fogging in the air. I could hear her inside, still crying, her voice muffled now as Julian said something I couldn't make out. My chest felt tight, but not with sadness, anger, maybe, or just exhaustion. I'd wanted her to feel something, to face what she'd done, and there it was, spilling out in tears and excuses. But it didn't change anything. She'd said what she said, done what she'd done, and no amount of "I'm sorry" could erase that. I leaned against the railing, staring out at the dark street, and let the quiet settle over me. This was my silence now, not hers. Later, after she'd left, Julian said she sat there for 10 minutes, then drove off without another word. My phone lit up. A wall of texts from her, one after another, pouring in like she couldn't stop herself. "I love you," one said. "I messed up so bad," another. "Please just talk to me." I didn't read them all, didn't need to. I'd heard her in person, seen the show she put on, and it wasn't enough. I forwarded the whole thread to Daniela, my lawyer, with a quick note. She came by. Let her deal with it, sort through the mess, figure out what it meant for the divorce papers I still hadn't signed. I wasn't ready to argue, to hash it out with Camille. She could talk to someone who cared, someone paid to listen. Julian came out after a while, handed me a beer, and sat next to me on the porch steps. "She's a wreck," he said, not looking at me. Kept saying it was all a mistake. I took a sip, the cold bottle sweating in my hand. "Maybe it was," I said. But it wasn't the first one. He nodded, and we sat there, the night stretching out around us. I thought about the house, the key, the cake, how she'd come here looking for me, but not really for me. For the version of us she could still control, the one where I'd cave and come back. That guy was gone, though, left behind somewhere in that snowstorm. She'd wanted silence, and now she had it, loud, messy, and hers to keep. I closed my eyes, let the beer sit heavy on my tongue, and felt the weight lift, just a little. I woke up to the sound of Julian banging around in the kitchen, the smell of bacon drifting through the house. It was a week after Camille's visit, and I'd settled into a strange kind of routine at his place: coffee in the morning, work from my laptop, quiet nights on the porch. The ache in my chest hadn't gone away, but it was duller now, like a bruise I could live with. That morning, though, something felt off. My phone was quiet, sure, but the world outside wasn't. Camille had been busy, I found out later, calling everyone she could think of, spinning her story wider. I didn't know it yet, sitting there with my coffee, but she'd turned up the volume on her version of things, and it was about to hit me hard. It started with my boss. He called me mid-morning, his voice gruff over the line. "Your wife's been on the phone with HR," he said. "Said you're going through something, might need time off." "What's this about?" I gripped the mug tighter, heat seeping into my palm. "She's not wrong about this something," I told him, "but I'm fine. Don't need time." He grunted, didn't push, but I could tell he was annoyed. Camille dragging my work into this felt like a line crossed. Then the gym texted, some guy I barely knew, saying she'd called, asked if I'd been in, if I was okay. Even Julian's mom got a call, her voice shaky when she left me a voicemail. "Camille says you're not yourself. Call me, please." She was everywhere, reaching into every corner of my life, trying to paint me as the one falling apart. I sat there, staring at my phone, the messages piling up like debris after a storm. She wasn't just looking for sympathy, she was building a case, making me the problem so she didn't have to be. It wasn't even the lie that got me. It was how casual she'd been about it, how easy it was for her to say, "I hope he crashes," and then turn around and play the worried wife. People do cruel things, sure, but it's the ones who don't blink that stick with you. I'd had enough of her noise, her excuses, so I decided to make some of my own. I'd recorded that moment at the cabin, not on purpose, just a habit from work, my phone always catching audio for notes. I'd found it a few days ago, buried in my files, her voice clear as day. "God, I hope he crashes. I could use the insurance." I hadn't listened to it again. Once was enough, but now it felt like a weapon. I uploaded it that afternoon, no fanfare, no explanation. Just that line, posted to a random account I'd made, public for anyone to hear. I didn't need to say it was her. Her friends would know. Her family might guess. People didn't need context. They'd fill in the blanks themselves. I hit send and shut the laptop, my hands steady for the first time in days. Julian walked in as I did it, saw the look on my face, and raised an eyebrow. "What did you do?" he asked. "Gave them something to listen to," I said, and he didn't ask more. He knew me well enough to let it ride. The fallout came fast. By evening, my phone, still silent from her number, started buzzing with texts from guys I hadn't talked to in months. "Dude, is that Camille?" one said. "What the hell's going on?" another asked. I didn't answer, just watched the ripple spread. Online, it was louder. People I didn't even know were sharing it, commenting, "Who says that? Sounds like she meant it. Insurance? Damn." And I let them talk. Blair's social media went dark first. She deleted everything. No posts, no profile, just gone. Camille turned her comments off, her page locked down, but I could imagine her scrolling, panicking, seeing her own words bounce back at her. For once, they were the ones getting silence, not me. I didn't feel good about it, not exactly. It wasn't joy, more like a grim kind of satisfaction, knowing she couldn't talk her way out of this one. She'd called my boss, my gym, Julian's mom, trying to sell her story, but this was her voice, her laugh, her truth. No one bought her joke, excuse when they heard it raw like that. I sat on Julian's couch that night, the house quiet except for the hum of the fridge, and thought about how she'd played it. She'd gone to everyone, thinking they'd take her side. My boss might have grumbled, the gym guy might have shrugged, even Julian's mom might have worried. But they didn't. Not after this. Her casual cruelty had a sound now, and it was louder than her tears. Julian came in later, a pizza box in hand, and dropped it on the table. "You see what's happening out there?" he asked, nodding at my phone. I nodded back, taking a slice. "Yeah, it's done." He chewed for a minute, then said, "She's gonna hate you for this." She already did, I replied, and he didn't argue. We ate in silence, the kind I'd started to like, the kind that didn't need filling. Camille's reckoning wasn't my doing. She'd built it herself, word by word, laugh by laugh. I just turned up the volume. And now, for the first time since that snowy drive, I felt the weight shift, not gone, but lighter. Her rumors were hers to carry now, and I was done listening. I woke up to the sound of rain tapping against Julian's windows, a steady gray drizzle that matched the heaviness in my bones. It had been 2 weeks since I dropped that audio online, and the noise from it had finally started to fade, fewer texts, fewer strangers chiming in, just a dull hum of aftermath. Camille hadn't reached out since, not directly anyway, and I'd gotten used to the quiet. But that morning, Daniela called, her voice crisp over the line. She wants to meet, she said. Through me, formal, no surprises. You in? I sat there, coffee cooling in my hand, and thought about it. Part of me wanted to say no, to keep the door shut, but another part, the part still tangled up in 8 years of marriage, needed to see her face, hear what she had left to say. Yeah, I told Daniela. But public, and you're there. She set it up, a cafe downtown, neutral ground, that afternoon. I got there early, picking a table by the window where I could watch the rain streak down the glass. Daniela showed up next, her briefcase tucked under her arm, and gave me a nod. You don't have to say much, she said, settling in. Let her talk. I appreciated that she knew I wasn't here to argue, just to listen, maybe to close something I'd left hanging. Then Camille walked in, and my breath caught. She looked like a shadow of herself, pale, thin, her eyes sunken like she hadn't slept in weeks. Her coat was damp from the rain, clinging to her frame, and she moved slow, like every step cost her. She saw me, hesitated, then sat across from us, hands folded tight on the table. She didn't start with tears this time, not like at Julian's. Her voice was soft, shaky, but controlled. I didn't mean it, she said, looking at me, not Daniela. What I said at the cabin, I didn't mean it. I leaned back, arms crossed, and kept my face blank. I'd heard this before, that it was a joke, line, but she kept going. I know you don't believe me, and I don't blame you. It was stupid, awful, and I said it anyway. But I never wanted you gone, not really. Her eyes flicked down, then back up, searching mine. I've been a mess since you left. I can't sleep, can't eat. I hate myself for it. Her fingers twisted together, knuckles white, and I saw the tremble in them. I didn't move, didn't soften. But you said it, I told her, my voice flat. You laughed about it, planned for it, money, insurance, all of it. She flinched, like I'd slapped her, and her mouth opened, then closed. I didn't plan anything, she said finally, quieter now. The money, I was scared, okay? Scared we'd fall apart someday, and I'd have nothing. It wasn't about you dying. It was about me surviving. I stared at her, letting that sit between us. Surviving. Like I was the threat, not the one who'd driven 8 hours with a cake to make her smile. Daniela scribbled something on her pad, silent, letting it play out. Then the tears came, slow at first, just a sheen in her eyes, then spilling over. I miss you, she said, voice breaking. I didn't know how much until you were gone. The house, it's empty without you. I can't stand it. She wiped her face with her sleeve, a quick, messy motion, and kept going. I'll do anything, therapy, counseling, whatever it takes. I just want a chance to explain, to fix this. She looked at me, pleading, like she could will me back to the man I'd been before the cabin. But that guy was gone, buried under her words, her choices. I didn't cry. Didn't feel the tug I might have once. We're in different stories now, I said, slow and clear. Yours is about regret. Mine's about survival. Her face crumpled, a sob catching in her throat. But I didn't stop. You had 8 years to say something else, to mean something else. You didn't. She stared at me, tears streaming, and I saw it hit her, the finality of it. Daniela shifted beside me, ready to step in, but Camille didn't fight. She just nodded, small and broken, like she'd run out of words. She tried one more time, her voice barely a whisper. I'm sorry. I know it's not enough, but I am. I didn't answer, just watched her. The cafe hummed around us, people chatting, cups clinking, but it felt like we were in a bubble, the rain outside sealing it shut. She stood after a minute, shaky, and grabbed her bag. I won't bother you again, she said, looking at me one last time, then walked out, her figure blurring through the wet glass. Daniela tapped her pen on the table. That's it, she asked. I nodded. That's it. Back at Julian's, I sat on the porch, the rain still falling, soaking the world in gray. Her version of regret didn't change mine. I'd survived her, survived us, and I wasn't going back. She looked broken, sure, but so had I, standing in that doorway with the cake. She'd made her choices, and I'd made mine. The silence she hated now? It was my peace, and I wasn't giving it up for her tears. I woke up to the sound of Julian's dog scratching at the back door, a low whine cutting through the morning quiet. It was day 60 since I'd walked out of the cabin, and the world had settled into something I could handle. Work from Julian's spare room, nights with a beer and a book, no more chaos from Camille. The audio I'd posted had faded from people's feeds, Blair was still off the grid, and Camille's last words at the cafe, "I won't bother you again," had held true. I'd started to think that was it, that we'd both moved into our separate silences. Then the mail came. Julian dropped it on the kitchen table that afternoon, a small stack of bills and junk, but one stood out, a plain envelope, no return address, her handwriting on the front. My name, just Mark, in her messy scrawl. I stared at it, my coffee going cold, and felt the past creep back in. I didn't open it right away. Part of me wanted to toss it, let it sit in the trash with the takeout menus and coupon flyers, but another part, the part that still remembered her laugh before it turned cruel, couldn't let it go. I took it to the porch, sat in the old chair Julian kept out there, and slid it open with my pocket knife. No fancy stationery, just a sheet of lined paper, her words spilling across it in blue ink. No, dear Mark, no formalities, just straight into it. I miss you, it started, and my chest tightened, not with longing, but with something heavier, something I couldn't name. Not the big stuff, not the fights or the silences, but the little things. The notes you'd leave in my lunch bag. Don't forget to eat, dummy. The way you'd pull me to the inside of the sidewalk so I wouldn't get splashed by cars. I didn't see it then, how much those things held us together. I leaned back, the paper crinkling in my hand, and let her words sink in. She wasn't begging this time, wasn't crying through the lines like at the cafe. This was quieter, sadder, like she'd sat with it too long to dress it up. I hate the silence now, she wrote. The house is too big, too empty. I turn on the TV just to hear something, but it's not the same. I keep waiting for you to walk in, grumbling about the cold, and you don't. I could picture her there, alone in that red brick place, the couch pillows still fluffed, the Wi-Fi still off because she never figured out how to fix it. The cake tasted like sawdust, she added, a little jagged line crossing out tasted like she'd second-guessed it. I ate it anyway, trying to feel something, but it was just gone. She didn't make excuses this time. No, it was a joke. No, Blair made me. Just remorse, raw and plain. I ruined us, she wrote. Not just that night, but before. Every time I laughed at something I shouldn't have. Every time I took you for granted. I see it now, and it's too late. I don't expect you to write back. Don't expect anything. I just needed you to know. That was it. No pleas, no promises, just her signing her name at the bottom, Camille, the E looping like it always did. I folded the letter, set it on my knee, and stared out at the yard, the grass patchy from the early spring thaw. I read it twice. The first time, I skimmed it, half expecting the old tricks, guilt trips, sob stories, but they weren't there. The second time, I went slow, letting each line hit me. The lunch notes, she'd never said much about them, just smiled when she found them, but now they were a ghost in her hands. The sidewalk thing, I hadn't even thought about it, just did it because my dad had, because it felt right. She'd noticed, though, and I hadn't known. I sat there, the letter heavy against my leg, and felt the pull of what we'd been, not the end, not the cabin, but the years before, when I thought we were solid. It wasn't love tugging me back, not anymore. It was memory, sharp and useless. Julian came out after a while, saw the paper, and didn't ask. "You good?" he said instead, leaning on the railing. I nodded, slow. "Yeah, just thinking." He left it at that, went back inside, and I stayed out there, the air cool against my skin. I didn't write back. Didn't call Daniela to add it to the file. Didn't do anything but sit with it, turning it over in my head. She missed me fine. She hated the silence, okay. But it didn't erase what she'd done, what I'd found out. The money, the insurance, the laugh in her voice when she'd said, "I hope he crashes." Regret didn't undo that. It just sat there, hers to carry, not mine. That night, I put the letter in a drawer, next to my dad's photos and the books I'd taken from the house. It wasn't trash, but it wasn't something I'd keep out either. I went to bed, the dog snores drifting from the living room, and slept better than I had in weeks. She'd said her piece, and I'd heard it. That was enough. The silence she hated was my steady ground now, and I wasn't trading it for her ghosts. I woke up on day 90 to a quiet house, the kind of stillness that felt earned, not forced. Julian was already out, some early errand. He'd mumbled the night before, and the dog was sprawled by the back door, snoring through the morning. I'd been at his place 3 months now, long enough to call it something like home, even if it wasn't permanent. The letter from Camille still sat in that drawer, unread since the day it came, but it hadn't left my mind. Not completely. Today felt different, though cleaner, like I could finally put a pin in it. I got up, made coffee, and decided to do something I hadn't planned until the idea hit me. I'd get the cake again. The same one, chocolate with raspberry filling from the same bakery I'd stopped at all those miles ago. Not for her, not for us, but for me. I drove into town, the spring air sharp through the truck's open window, and pulled up to the little shop. The bell jingled when I walked in, the same as it had that snowy night, and the woman behind the counter smiled like she remembered me. Maybe she did. Chocolate raspberry, she asked, and I nodded, handing over the cash. The box felt lighter this time, no storm weighing it down, no hope pinned to it. I took it back to my new place, not Julian's, but a small apartment I'd signed for a week ago, a fresh start with bare walls and a view of nothing special. I set the cake on the counter, the kitchen still half unpacked, and stared at it. This wasn't about reliving anything. It was about ending it. I grabbed my phone, snapped a picture of the cake, box open, frosting smooth, untouched, and sent it to her. No words, no caption, just the image. I didn't know why, exactly. Maybe to show her I could still stand in the same moment and not break. Maybe just to close the loop. She replied fast, faster than I expected. "I'm sorry," her text said. "I know it's too late." I looked at it, the screen glowing in the dim kitchen, and didn't answer. She was right. It was too late, but not for the reasons she probably thought. It wasn't about forgiveness or second chances. It was about me keeping what I'd found, this quiet I'd built out of her mess. I cut a slice of the cake, the knife sliding through easy, and took a bite. It was good, sweet, sharp, the raspberry cutting through the chocolate just right. Nothing like sawdust. I ate it slow, standing there by the counter, the apartment silent except for the hum of the fridge. This wasn't her cake anymore, not the one I'd carried through the snow, not the one she'd laughed over. It was mine, and it tasted like something new. Closure, maybe, or just the absence of her shadow. I didn't need her regret to feel it. I'd gotten here on my own, step by step, from that doorway to this counter. Looking back, it wasn't the crash she'd wished for that broke us. It was everything after. The money she'd hidden, the insurance she'd joked about, the way she'd turned it all into a story where I was the one who'd lost it. I'd spent those first days reeling, the 8-hour drive looping in my head, her voice cutting deeper than the cold. But I'd climbed out, through Leo's numbers, Lena's warning, Daniela's steady hand. I'd left the key, shut off the Wi-Fi, posted the audio, faced her at the cafe. Each move was mine, not hers, and it had brought me here, to a place where silence wasn't a punishment anymore. It was peace. She'd come to Julian's that day, crying and pleading, and I'd closed the door. She'd sat across from me at the cafe, broken and thin, and I'd walked away. The letter had landed in my hands, full of her ghosts, and I'd let it sit. Every time, I'd chosen this, the quiet over her noise, the truth over her spin. And now, with the cake in front of me, I could see it clear. I didn't need her to say sorry. I didn't need her at all. She'd wanted me gone, one way or another, and I'd given her that, just not how she'd pictured it. She got the house, the empty rooms, the silence she'd hated. I got this, freedom, steady in mine. I finished the slice, wiped the knife clean, and left the rest of the cake on the counter. Maybe I'd have more later, maybe not. It didn't matter. I stepped onto the tiny balcony, the town stretching out below, and breathed in the cool air. No storm, no rage, just the day unfolding. My phone stayed quiet, no more texts from her, no calls from anyone asking where I'd gone. They didn't need to. I was here, in a life I'd carved out, not one she'd shaped for me. The past was done. The cake was just cake, and the silence? It was mine to keep, not hers to give. I leaned on the railing, let the wind brush my face, and felt the... You ever feel your heartbeat in your teeth? It's a hollow, thudding ache that shifts your focus inward until every nerve in your jaw aches with anticipation. That's exactly what happened the moment Karina Ellison slid the HR document across the conference table, her fingers barely grazing the paper's edge before she snapped it into place, like a gavel striking down a verdict. I watched the heads of operations swivel in unison, their eyes widening as they recognized the stark, typewritten ultimatum puppy beneath the fluorescent glare. Accept the 60% pay cut, or I'll find someone who will. Silence roared in that room, a vacuum sucking the oxygen from my lungs. My pulse drummed in my molars, but somehow I managed not to flinch. Her words came out cold and measured, each syllable a calculated blow delivered in front of the entire staff, her kingdom. Cold, public, humiliating. Karina's voice never wavered, never dipped into hesitation. She didn't need to. This was her power move, a demonstration of everything she built: respect, fear, authority. Yet they didn't know that I was her husband. Not officially. That fact was part of her design: control behind closed doors, invisibility in public. I'd watched her sculpt our shared world around my absence, turning me into a ghost at our own dinner table, and there she was, doing it again. I kept my face neutral, my posture relaxed, though beneath the surface I was raw with outrage. My mind raced through every memory: late nights drafting our first client proposal, the triumph when we closed that Series A round, the way we used to steal kisses in the stairwell before deadlines swallowed us whole. Back then, we were equals, partners. Now, here I stood as collateral, evidence of her ruthless ascent. When her gaze flicked to me, calm, imperious, I responded with a measured, "I'll need 24 hours to consider." My tone held just enough restraint to mask the tsunami inside. Every eye in the room bore into me, assessing, waiting for a sign of weakness. They didn't understand. None of them knew I'd once been her confidant, her co-conspirator in every late-night brainstorming session. They saw a colleague, maybe an underperforming executive whose time had passed. They didn't see the husband she dismantled piece by piece, the man who had supported her climb to the top while she sharpened her claws. But now, as I watched my words echo against the glass walls, I felt a quiet shift inside, the cracking of something I thought was unbreakable. Something in me broke in that moment, too. Karina's lips twitched, almost a smile. She stood, smoothing the lapels of her tailored blazer, and announced the meeting was adjourned. Around me, chairs scraped back, and a low murmur rippled through the room as colleagues gathered their briefcases and coffee cups. I didn't move. I watched them file past, their conversations hushed, as if they were afraid to disturb the moment's aftermath. Their shocked glances cut sharper than any blade. I allowed myself a slow breath before packing my laptop and notes, every motion deliberate, like a man who wants to show he still controls his own destiny, even if only in that small gesture. When I finally stepped out into the hallway, the corridor lights felt harsh and accusing. I closed my eyes for a split second and pictured Lucas, our 11-year-old, asleep in his room, blissfully unaware that his father was being publicly castrated in the name of corporate strategy. There was anger, yes, but beneath it was a deeper tremor of betrayal, an ache for the life we once shared, for the partnership I believed we had. Yet I knew that path had closed the moment she chose to humiliate me in front of people who would never care if I existed or not. I descended the elevator, pressing the lobby button with an almost violent snap, and as the doors opened, I realized I couldn't go home, not yet. I wasn't ready to face her tonight, to pretend everything was normal over dinner. I ducked into the stairwell instead, my footsteps echoing on concrete, and leaned against the cool wall. My fingers itched for my phone, but I resisted. Instead, I focused on steadying my breath, grounding myself in the moment. I replayed her words, the way she looked at me with that flicker of triumph in her eyes. I'll find someone who will. Someone who would take my place, who would be grateful for scraps. But that wasn't me anymore. The man who sat in that boardroom didn't tremble under her gaze. He didn't cower. He met her challenge with a request for time, a luxury she rarely afforded herself or anyone else. In that request, I felt the spark of something else, hope. Not hope for reconciliation, but hope for escape and reinvention. I pressed my back to the wall, closed my eyes, and made a decision to answer her ultimatum not with defeat, but with defiance. I straightened up, squared my shoulders, and stepped out of the stairwell into the quiet hum of the parking garage. The cool air hit me like a shock, and I inhaled, tasting freedom for the first time in years. I would give her 24 hours. I would consider her cut, her terms, her power, but I would also consider my own options. And when I re-entered that glass fortress tomorrow, I wouldn't be the same man who walked out tonight. Something had shattered alongside my composure, but what emerged was stronger, a conviction that there was a life beyond her empire, and I intended to build it on my own terms. In that dark garage, with the echo of my footsteps fading, I touched my thumb to my teeth, feeling the rapid pulse beneath. Yes, I still felt my heartbeat there, but it no longer held fear. It held determination. I had 24 hours to choose. And I was going to choose me. We were just two names on a startup's payroll back then, Karina and me, young, hungry, and unaware of how ambition can rot the foundation it's built on. Silver Systems didn't have glossy logos or multi-million-dollar contracts at the time. Just a vision and a loft office above a bakery that made the whole place smell like sourdough and dreams. We were a ragtag bunch, chasing cloud infrastructure innovation like it was oxygen, and somehow in the middle of the chaos, we found each other. It started as late-night burrito runs, then turned into stolen kisses by the printer, and before I knew it, we were co-writing code, goals, and a life. Karina was fire, sharp, commanding, impossible to ignore. She saw ladders everywhere and climbed them 2 rungs at a time. I admired that at first. I encouraged it, supported her moves, took notes during pitch rehearsals, edited her presentations, even let her practice telling off underperforming engineers on me just so she'd sound fierce but fair. I wanted her to rise. I never realized she was training herself to rise alone. When she got promoted to VP of HR, I celebrated like it was my own win. She had presence in meetings, command over a room, and I found my niche in strategic partnerships. Quiet work, but critical. I built our client list from nothing: cold calls, trade shows, chasing leads that didn't want to be chased. I landed contracts that floated payroll during tight months, established relationships that the board would later call foundational to our scale. But I wasn't flashy about it. I wasn't on magazine panels or featured in Forbes' Next 100. I didn't need that. Karina did. She loved the spotlight, the applause, the LinkedIn reposts that called her visionary and disruptive. I was content with peace. She craved clout. And somewhere along the way, she stopped seeing us as partners and started seeing me as a prop, a placeholder, a man behind the curtain. We moved into a townhome in Rosegate once bonuses started to roll in. I remember the first night there, standing in the kitchen while Lucas napped upstairs, and she walked in wearing her silver-branded fleece, eyes sparkling from a company-wide presentation she'd just delivered. "We're building something huge," she whispered, arms wrapping around my waist. Together. I believed her. Foolishly. Because even then, the cracks had begun. She didn't ask how my meetings went anymore. She missed dinner twice a week for executive strategy calls and slowly replaced our shared calendar with her own. Our conversations drifted from personal to professional and then stopped altogether. At work, she stopped looking at me like I was her person. She looked at me like an asset, useful, but expendable. I should have spoken up. Should have pulled the ripcord when I started noticing the small humiliations, the time she corrected my report in front of the junior staff instead of waiting till we got home, or when she forgot to loop me in on a major contract negotiation even though the client had been mine. But I didn't. I told myself it was temporary, that the pressure would ease, that she'd remember we were on the same team. That boardroom meeting proved otherwise. After she slid that document across the table, with its ice-cold demand for a 60% pay cut and a threat of replacement, I replayed every compromise I'd ever made for her. Every sacrifice that now sat neatly buried under her empire. This wasn't a moment of miscommunication. This was who she had become, and who she expected me to become: silent, compliant, replaceable. I drove home that day on autopilot, gripping the steering wheel tighter than necessary, the taste of humiliation still sour in my mouth. Our neighborhood looked too pristine, too polished for what I was feeling, like reality refused to match the storm inside me. I pulled into the driveway and just sat there for a moment, engine idling, watching the soft glow of our living room lamp filter through the blinds. When I stepped inside, Lucas was on the floor building a Lego version of something that looked like Silver's office. He looked up and smiled. "Mom said you were in a big meeting." He didn't know. He couldn't. And that innocence punched me harder than anything she'd said. Karina was in the kitchen, heating something in the microwave. She didn't turn around. "Hey," she said, casual. Like she hadn't tried to publicly amputate my career just a few hours earlier. I wanted to shout, to demand an explanation. But instead, I stared at her back, at the way she moved with such certainty, like her world was untouched by the damage she left in mine. You ambushed me today, I said finally. She paused. Barely. Then she turned, arms crossed. It wasn't personal. It was a strategic decision. You did it in front of them, I said, voice low. Their staff. Not family, she replied, coolly. They don't know we're married. They don't need to. I blinked. You think that makes it better? She shrugged. I made a call. It's not about you. And that's when I knew. It wasn't about me, not anymore. Not for a long time. I had been riding shotgun in a car she was driving straight off a cliff, and I'd been too loyal to jump out. I walked upstairs, past Lucas's drawings taped to the wall, past our wedding photo that still hung crooked on the hallway frame. I stood in our bedroom for a long time, looking at the life we built. The life she broke, one calculated decision at a time. That night, I didn't sleep. I watched the ceiling shift from shadow to sunlight and felt the weight of something final settle into my bones. I wasn't angry anymore. I was awake. By morning, I wasn't the man who used to quietly protect her legacy. I was the man she underestimated. And I was done waiting for her to remember what we built. I was going to build something better. Without her. I couldn't stop replaying the scene. Karina's voice sharp, cold, like a blade across the back of my neck. The way the others looked at me as she did it, some with pity, some with silent relief that they weren't the target. The tap of her pen after the ultimatum. The stillness in the room as I said I needed 24 hours. And now, alone in my car, I sat parked outside our home with the engine off, fingers still gripping the wheel like I was waiting for something to crash. The house was dark except for the small porch light that flickered every few seconds, casting shadows across the front yard like ghosts pacing the grass. I didn't move. I stared at the windshield, my reflection faint in the glass. I didn't know who I saw anymore. Husband, father, employee, target. And now, maybe something else entirely, something I hadn't felt in a long time, unshackled. Humiliation has a strange way of stripping things clean. You stop making excuses. You stop lying to yourself. You see things plain. Eventually, I stepped out and quietly made my way into the house. Lucas was asleep, his door cracked open just enough for the glow of his nightlight to seep through. I paused, peeking inside. He had fallen asleep with a drawing clutched in one hand, crayons scattered across his bed. I stepped in softly, eased the paper from his fingers. It was a family drawing, him in the center, Karina on the right, our dog that died 2 years ago on the left. Me? I wasn't there. Just a smudge where another figure might have gone, erased with a careless pink thumb. Maybe I'd missed too many breakfasts. Too many games. Maybe I'd made myself invisible. Or maybe I'd been made that way. I tucked the sheet on his nightstand and walked to my office downstairs. The walls were still lined with client folders, pitch decks, hand-drawn org charts from when Silvera was nothing more than a desperate group of tech optimists trying to outthink Amazon. I'd built our strategic arm from scratch. Courted clients no one else could get close to. Held on to relationships like they were rope bridges. And now? A 60% pay cut for the man who brought in a third of the company's recurring revenue. Loyalty was a currency I spent far too generously. I opened my laptop. The company org chart still sat open in a pinned tab from earlier that afternoon. My name, now attached to a strange new title, Special Consultant. It felt like a severance in disguise. I stared at it for a full minute before closing the tab. Then I opened a new one and typed 4 words, Kortnick Systems career page. Kortnick's. The name had always lingered like a whisper in Silvera's corridors. Our top competitor. Sleeker, louder, better funded. They tried poaching me 3 times before, always dangling better pay, better titles, faster tracks. And I turned them down each time for loyalty, for principle, for Karina. Never again. I bypassed their careers page and pulled up my contacts instead. Jared Ortega. The name brought back a flood of memories. He'd been an intern on my team a decade ago, fresh out of grad school with more ideas than tact. I mentored him, taught him how to pitch without sounding like he was begging, showed him how to read a room. We'd lost touch when he left for Kortnick's 5 years back. Now he was VP of Strategic Growth. I stared at his name for a beat longer. My mouse hovered over a message. I clicked. Jared. Long time. Hope you're well. I'd like to discuss something important. Are you available this week for a quick conversation? I hit send, closed the tab, and stared into the quiet darkness. For minutes later, I heard the ping. I leaned forward and opened it. Marcus. Damn, I hoped this day would come. You free tomorrow morning? Early. I stared at the message. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. For the first time in a long time, I smiled. Something real, not rehearsed or diplomatic. Name the place, I replied. We settled on Rosegate Diner. 6:30 a.m. That was Jared. Early, eager, efficient. I leaned back in my chair and exhaled, my fingers tingling with a sensation I hadn't felt in over a year. Possibility. Not in a vague, someday kind of way. But right now, like someone had just cracked open the window in a room where I'd been suffocating. Down the hall, I heard the muffled clatter of Karina moving in the kitchen, probably preparing her overnight oats or one of her nutrient smoothies with all the silent confidence of someone who had never been challenged. I didn't go to her. I didn't say a word. I powered down my laptop and went upstairs, stepping past the photos on the wall, vacations, awards dinners, Lucas's first birthday party. All curated moments, all frozen in time. In our bedroom, Karina was already in bed, a book on her lap. She looked up but said nothing, just returned to her reading like I was a coat on a rack, something she kept around but no longer noticed. I changed in silence, slid into bed without brushing against her, stared at the ceiling, heart still echoing against my ribs. She didn't ask about the meeting. She didn't ask how I felt. She never did. And tomorrow, I would meet with the man she once laughed off as junior talent. I would sit across from someone who remembered what I taught him, not just about business, but about loyalty and grit. And I would listen to what he had to offer, not out of desperation, but with intent. I'd given Silvra everything. I gave her everything. Now, it was time to give something back to myself. Across the bridge, a new chapter was waiting. And this time, I would walk in with both eyes open. The Rosegate Diner hadn't changed since I'd last been there 5 years ago. Same cracked leather booths, same flickering neon sign above the counter, and the same waitress, Gloria, who moved like she had owned the place long before the actual owner ever signed a lease. It was the kind of place people came to disappear into routine. But that morning, before the sun even touched the rooftops, I wasn't here for routine. I was here to end one chapter and begin another. Jared was already seated when I walked in, grinning like a man who'd just found a winning lottery ticket. He stood up to hug me. "Marcus," he said, slapping me on the back. I swear, I've pictured this moment more times than I'd admit to HR. I chuckled, easing into the seat across from him. "I see Courtnix hasn't taken the charm out of you. Just polished it," he said, then signaled to Gloria without even glancing at the menu. "Coffee for both. Black, right?" Some things never changed. I leaned back, studied him a little. He'd filled out, his jaw sharper, his suit better tailored, his voice steadier. He looked like a man who finally owned the rooms he used to sneak into. And yet there was still that hint of awe in his eyes when he spoke to me, like I was the guy who pulled him out of his own shadow. Maybe I had. But today, I wasn't his mentor. Today, we were equals. "So," I said, folding my hands, "let's talk." Jared didn't waste time. He pulled out a manila folder and slid it across the table. The irony wasn't lost on me. 2 days ago, my wife had done the same thing, with threats tucked behind every sentence. But this folder? It hummed with opportunity. "Senior Director of Strategic Growth," he said. 180 base. 30% bonus potential. Full benefits. Signing bonus that'll make you forget you ever got downgraded to consultant. And more importantly, he leaned in, lowering his voice. "We'll fast-track you to VP in 6 months, maybe less, if even half your former clients follow you." I blinked. "That's generous." "No," he replied. "That's overdue." I opened the folder. Neatly printed offer letter, compensation package, NDAs, standard onboarding forms. But what caught my eye wasn't what was in the folder, it was what wasn't. "No non-compete clause," I said aloud. Jared nodded. "We don't need it. You're not just a name on a resume. You're the reason deals close. People trust you. And trust doesn't come with an expiration date." I sipped my coffee, letting the words settle. "I meant in my current contract," I clarified. "Silvra. Karina had it removed last year. Said it would give me more flexible." He raised an eyebrow. "You serious?" I pulled out my phone, tapped through a few PDFs, and turned it toward him. Page 11. No non-compete. No client solicitation clause. No IP restrictions. Jared whistled low. "She thought you'd never leave." She was wrong. He tapped the table, smirking. "You know they'll try to drag you through the mud anyway." I nodded. "Let them. I've bled for that company. The files I built, the trust one earned, the clients I signed, They weren't handed to me. They weren't gifted because I married into power. I earned them, and I won't lift a finger to steal a single one. You won't need to, he said. They'll call you. They'll ask where you are. They'll follow because they want to, not because you ask. The waitress brought our food. I hadn't even realized I was hungry until the smell of eggs and toast hit me. Jared took a bite, then pointed at the folder. So? You in? I didn't answer right away. I picked up the pin he'd placed neatly beside the packet. It felt heavy in my hand, not just from the metal, but from what it symbolized. Not revenge, not ego, but self-respect. After being buried in Karina's shadow, after being turned into a convenient pawn in her strategic ambitions, here was a chance to step back into the light. I signed. Jared raised his coffee mug. To new beginnings. To freedom, I said. We ate in silence after that, the kind that only exists between people who understand the gravity of a moment. As we left the diner, the sky had begun to brighten, soft streaks of orange cutting through the dawn. I climbed into my car, folder in hand, and sat there for a long moment. Not because I was unsure, but because I felt weightless. Like the tension I'd been carrying in my chest for the past 2 years had finally lifted. When I got home, the house was quiet. Karina's car was gone, early meeting, no doubt. She didn't ask where I'd gone, didn't check to see if I came home last night, didn't seem to care that we hadn't spoken since the HR ambush. I went to my office, closed the door, and pulled up the silver employee handbook, the one I'd helped write. It was all still there, pages of policies, clauses, protocols. But none of it applied to me anymore. I was untethered. Still, I scanned through my own employment agreement again, just to be sure. No non-compete. No restrictions on where I worked next. Karina had assumed I'd be loyal until the end. She'd never imagined I'd have the spine to walk away, much less the leverage to land somewhere stronger. She'd unhooked my leash thinking I wouldn't move without her. Her mistake. I printed my resignation letter that night. Straightforward. Professional. No bitterness on the page, but every sentence dripped with clarity. Tomorrow, I would walk into her glass-walled office wearing the same suit I wore when we pitched silver to its first investor. Black, crisp, poised. And this time, I wouldn't be the one begging for her approval. I'd be the one holding the final word. I wore the suit with intention. Blackwell, tailored. The one I hadn't touched in years but never had the heart to get rid of. The one I wore when Karina and I pitched silver to the angel investors who first gave us a shot. Back then, she had held my hand under the conference table, squeezing twice every time she got nervous. Now, she wouldn't even meet my eyes across the dinner table. The irony was rich. I adjusted my cufflinks in the mirror, took a long breath, and walked out the door. The drive to Silvera was quiet. Not a single song felt right, so I let the silence ride with me. I passed the same coffee shop where Karina and I used to split a bagel on early mornings. She always took the top half with the extra sesame seeds. These days, she barely spoke before leaving for the gym or another strategy call. Somewhere between ambition and titles, we stopped being a team. When I stepped into the building, I nodded at reception, then rode the elevator to the executive floor. My heart didn't race. No tremble in my hands. Just a strange calm, like I was walking into a funeral I'd already grieved. The doors opened and there she was, behind the glass wall of her office, back straight, pen in hand, dissecting some document like it owed her an apology. I knocked once. She looked up, surprised to see me. "Marcus," she said flatly. "I thought you were taking the day." "I'm here to make a decision," I replied, stepping inside and closing the door behind me. She gestured without standing. "Go ahead." I placed the resignation letter on her desk. No preamble, no apology, just the truth in 12-point calibri. She didn't reach for it, just stared at it like it might explode. Then she leaned back in her chair, arms crossing slowly. "You're making a mistake," she said. "No," I replied. "I'm making a choice." There was a flicker behind her eyes. Surprise, maybe, or something closer to irritation. She wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by me. "You're walking away from 14 years, she said. I nodded. 14 years where I made this company millions. 14 years where I stayed loyal even when it cost me time with my son, cost me my peace. Her tone hardened. "You're not going to find another role in this market at your level. Not with your compensation expectations. Not with this economy." I smiled then. Just a little. "Actually, I already have." That made her blink. Just for a second. The mask cracked. "Where?" "Kortnick's," I said. Calm. Direct. And there it was. The moment she lost control, her body went rigid. Her fingers curled around the edge of the desk like she was holding onto the ground beneath her. Courtnix, she repeated, as if the name itself was a betrayal. They offered what I'm worth. What I should have been worth here. Her voice dropped. You do realize we'll sue? I reached into my leather folder and dropped the Courtnix offer letter beside my resignation. No non-compete. No IP conflicts. No client solicitation. You forgot to protect the one person you thought would never leave. The silence was heavy. She flipped through the Courtnix contract, her eyes scanning the terms. I watched her lips press into a thin line. The woman who once used to say, "We make a great team," now calculating exactly how she lost a partner, personally and professionally. I removed the non-compete to give you room to grow, she said tightly. No, I replied. You removed it because you thought I'd never use it. Her jaw clenched. I was loyal to a fault, I continued. I passed on offers. Sat through your meetings where I was invisible. Took the back seat so you could shine. I never wanted to be the face. But when you humiliated me in front of your team, our team, you made something very clear. I don't belong here anymore. And I'm done pretending I do. She stood, finally, as if height would help her reclaim authority. This will damage our reputation. No, I said. It will damage yours. For a beat, we stood there in silence. Two people who once built something side by side. Now on opposite sides of a war neither of us declared out loud. The room felt colder than I remembered. More clinical. Less hours. I built this company, she said quietly. So did I replied. And now I'm building something else. There was a finality in the way I said it. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed. I could tell she wanted to say more, but there was nothing left that could undo what had already been broken. I turned to leave. Marcus, she called just as I reached the door. I paused, hand on the knob. Why now, she asked. Her voice wasn't demanding anymore. It was something closer to human. I looked back at her. The woman who used to dance barefoot in our living room, who once whispered her dreams against my collarbone, who used to believe in us. Because yesterday, I said, I realized I've spent too long being loyal to someone who stopped being loyal to me. Then I opened the door and stepped out. By the time I reached my office, news had already started to ripple through the floor. Devin from legal gave me a long, unreadable look. Maria from finance stood near the coffee machine, eyes glassy. I gave her a nod. She smiled weakly and mouthed, "Thank you." I packed my things in silence. A few folders. My son's crayon drawing of a rocket ship. A coffee mug that said, "Do the work." I left the framed picture of Karina and me at last year's gala in the drawer. That wasn't a memory I needed anymore. HR pinged me before I could head out. We'll coordinate your exit documents, the email said. Please wait for security to escort you per protocol. Security. After all I'd done, after all I gave. This was how it ended. Like a threat. Like a liability. I waited. Calm. Unbothered. I didn't want a scene. I didn't need one. The security guard was polite, almost apologetic. Just protocol, Mr. Ellison, he muttered. I nodded. Of course. As we walked through the corridor, I could feel eyes on me. Colleagues trying to look busy. Screens flickering with pretend work. No one spoke, but everyone watched. And then I stepped through the glass doors of silver one final time. No announcement. No applause. Just quiet shoes on tile and a gust of wind as the doors shut behind me. But I didn't look back. Not once. The air outside Silver's building was different. Not just cooler, but freer, like the kind of breeze that lets you know you've just walked away from a fire and survived. I stood on the steps for a few seconds longer than I needed to, holding the box of my things in one arm, my resignation confirmation envelope in the other. It was strange how light it all felt. After 14 years of loyalty, I expected the weight of regret, the tug of nostalgia. Instead, I felt nothing but clarity. Devin from legal had sent me a one-line Slack message an hour before. Do you want a quiet exit strategy? I declined without hesitation. I didn't need fanfare, but I wasn't going to slink out the back door like I'd been caught stealing office supplies. I wanted them to see me leave, to feel the ripple of it. Maria from finance had been crying. She didn't say much, just hugged me fiercely and whispered. She didn't have to do it like that. She meant Karina. Everyone did. They'd seen her play her hand, wield her power in that conference room not like a leader, but like a tyrant marking her territory. And now that I was gone, they'd be watching her even more closely, waiting to see who'd be next. The security escort wasn't even necessary, but protocol demanded it. For senior staff, they claimed. What they meant was, for those whose exits hurt the bottom line. The guard walked quietly beside me, eyes fixed ahead. When we reached the elevator, he pressed the button, stepped back. I glanced at him. You draw the short straw? I asked. He gave a half smile. You're not the first executive I've walked out, Mr. Ellison. But you're the first one who left with his head held high. I appreciated that more than I thought I would. When the doors opened to the lobby, I stepped out to a hushed room. Receptionists paused mid-call. Interns pretended to scroll through emails they weren't reading. I walked across the marble floors I used to help mop in the early days when we couldn't afford cleaning staff, back when Karina and I shared a desk and a single dream. Now she had an entire corner office, and I had the one thing she couldn't reclaim, my name, my value, and the trust of every client I'd ever worked with. I exited the building into the afternoon sun, slid the box onto the passenger seat of my car, and sat for a long while with the engine off. No calls, no emails, just stillness. Then, almost like clockwork, my phone lit up. First was Sonia Adair from Teltrix Solutions. Hey Marcus, just heard. Where are you headed? Then Marcus Doyle from Graywell International. Tell me you're staying in the industry. We want to talk. A few minutes later, Elaine Winters. The same client who once said she'd never work with anyone but Silvera. If you're leaving, I'm reconsidering our position. Let's connect soon. I hadn't pitched, hadn't even hinted. And yet here they were calling, texting, asking where I went. Because it wasn't about the company. It never had been. They were buying me. My judgment. My relationship. The years I spent learning their business inside and out. Karina never understood that. She thought people could be managed like numbers. That loyalty could be drafted into contracts. But real loyalty isn't written down. It's earned. I replied to each one with a simple message. We'll talk Monday. I'll have something to share. Then I opened a fresh notebook. Wrote 3 words at the top of the page. Courtnix. Day 1. That night, I got home before Lucas did. He had soccer practice, and Karina had volunteered to do the pickup, probably to soften the optics, to paint a picture of domestic unity that hadn't existed in months. I sat at the kitchen table, box beside me, and took out a photo from the top. Me and Lucas at a park 2 years ago. He was holding a popsicle, his mouth stained blue, his hand in mine. I'd forgotten about this one. Karina had taken it. I remembered how she smiled at us then, genuinely. I wondered where that woman had gone. The garage door opened. I heard the car pull in, the telltale sound of Lucas kicking off his cleats before he even got to the door. He burst in a moment later, breathless. Dad, did you see my goal? Not yet, I said, standing up. But you can show me. I'm home early. His eyes lit up. You're never home this early. I will be now. He ran off to get his ball, and I turned just as Karina walked in. She looked tired. Not exhausted, just drained in that permanent way success can sometimes carve into a person. Her eyes flicked to the box on the table. So it's done, she said. It is. She nodded. They'll come after you. I didn't take anything that wasn't mine. No clients solicited. No documents. You built your company on rules. I followed everyone. She sighed and leaned against the kitchen counter. I didn't think you'd actually do it. I know. There was a long silence between us, filled only by the sound of Lucas kicking the ball against the living room wall and laughing at the rebound. I never meant to hurt you, she said at last. I met her eyes. You didn't need to mean it. You just needed to stop seeing me. That was the moment it landed for both of us, that the damage wasn't in one public insult or one pay cut. It had started long ago in all the quiet choices, the diminishing, the dismissals, the absence of kindness when power arrived. I hope you find what you're looking for, I said, voice even. She nodded once and stepped past me into the living room. I didn't follow. Later that night, after Lucas was asleep, I emailed Jared. All 4 clients reached out. Not because I asked. Because they saw what you saw. He replied 5 minutes later. Then we begin. And we did. Monday morning hit like a starting pistol. No time for nerves, no time for nostalgia. I sat at my new desk, sleek, minimalist, modern, with a fresh notepad, a full mug of black coffee, and a locked-in determination I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't easing into Courtnix. I was leading. Jared had made it clear the minute I signed. We're not hiring you to blend in. We're building a new lane for you. That lane began now. At 8:03 a.m., my inbox chimed. Subject, checking in. Marcus, just heard the news. If you're open to a conversation, I'd love to catch up. We've got some flexibility coming up in Q3, and I've always valued your insight. Sonia Dare, Teltrix Solutions. Sonia was old school, sharp as a blade, and twice as unforgiving if you crossed her. She never moved lightly. The fact that she was the first to reach out wasn't an accident. It was a signal. By 8:17 a.m., I had two more emails waiting, Marcus Doyle from Graywell and Fiona Lacey from Enduratech. None of them asked directly if I'd poached them. They were too savvy for that. Instead, the messages read like invitations. Where are you landing? We may need a new approach. Let me know where you are. Every word coded in plausible deniability, every sentence humming with interest. And I hadn't made a single call. That was the thing Karina never understood. Business relationships aren't built on discounts or gimmicks. They're built on trust. Trust that's earned in quiet ways. Meeting deadlines without being asked, staying late to walk a client through integration issues, remembering the name of a client's daughter when no one else did. Trust lives in the small details. And now, as the news of my departure rippled through the industry, trust was doing the work for me. I didn't rush to reply. I spent the morning reviewing Courtnix's client portfolios, looking for gaps, missed opportunities, areas where we could outperform Silvra. It wasn't hard to find them. Silvra had become bloated, too many middle managers, too many processes that smothered momentum. I knew because I helped build them. But Courtnix was lean, fast, and ready to move. At 11:20 a.m., Jared stepped into my office, a grin already spreading across his face. "Let me guess," he said. "They're calling." "They're circling," I corrected, tapping my inbox. "They'll call by Friday." "They'll call today," he said, pulling up a chair. "Sonia's on a panel with me next week. She asked if we could grab coffee in advance. I've known her for 8 years. She's not a coffee kind of woman." I nodded, but I wasn't surprised. This wasn't arrogance. It was the slow unfolding of inevitable consequences. Silver thought they owned those accounts. What they owned was access. What I had was loyalty. And that couldn't be bought back. Jared slid a paper onto my desk. "List of key accounts we want to target. Most of them are clients you touched at some point, even if indirectly. Take a look. You know them better than we do." I scanned the list. Teltrix, Graywell, Norkin, Xylene, and 3 others I'd helped onboard back in the lean days when Silvra still hosted brainstorming sessions on folding tables. I recognized the names. I remembered the wins. And I remembered how I was never the one invited to the podium when the deals closed. "How aggressive are we being?" I asked. "You tell me," Jared said. "We're not stealing. We're simply being open. If they come, we catch. No emails. No pitches. No contact first. Just let the magnet work." And it was already working. At 12:03 p.m., the first call came. My phone buzzed. Elaine Winters. The same Elaine who once told me, to my face, "I don't switch vendors. I don't do drama." The woman who once asked Karina to remove me from a Zoom call because she thought executives should know when to exit quietly. I picked up. "Elaine," I said. "Marcus," she replied, her tone cool but curious. "You landed somewhere yet?" "I have." "Courtnix." "Yes." There was a pause. "Good. I've been waiting for a reason." A reason. That's what I had become, a reason to reevaluate, to reconsider, to realign. We talked for 6 minutes. She asked questions about Courtnix's roadmap, stability, ethics. I answered clearly, honestly, with no attempts to sell her. When we hung up, I didn't press. I didn't follow up. I didn't need to. At 2:12 p.m., Marcus Doyle followed. By 4:47 p.m., I had 6 meetings on the calendar. All requested. None initiated by me. I leaned back in my chair, watching the soft glow of sunset stretch across the Courtnix skyline view, an office without tension, without judgment, without silent warfare tea. When Karina came to pick him up, she paused in the doorway. "You're home early," she said. "I work somewhere that values balance," I said, not looking up from the drawing Lucas had taped to the fridge. She didn't respond. As they left, Lucas turned back and whispered, "Can we hang out again Wednesday?" "Count on it," I said. I closed the door and stood there for a long moment, the house quiet, the evening light soft and forgiving. I'd spent years thinking that victory was about holding the high ground, staying loyal, waiting to be recognized. But real victory? It was having people remember who you were when you're no longer in the room. And they were remembering now. It was a Thursday night. Late. Lucas had just gone to bed, and I'd finished replying to a last batch of emails, quiet ripples from the growing wave of client shifts. The numbers were speaking for themselves. Courtnix's weekly growth metrics were starting to mirror Silver's losses. Even Jared, usually calm and smooth, was starting to wear a look I hadn't seen before. Hunger. The kind of hunger that came from watching years of waiting finally start to bear fruit. I just set my phone down when it rang, an unknown number, local area code. I stared at the screen for a second before answering. Marcus Ellison, I said. There was a pause. Then, Marcus. It's Harlan Royce, the CEO of Silver Systems. I stood without realizing it, one hand bracing the edge of the kitchen island. I hadn't heard his voice in months. Even when I was still with the company, Harlan was one of those appear once a quarter leaders, only visible when there were cameras or crises. Apparently, this was both. Evening, Harlan, I said evenly. Didn't expect to hear from you. I'd like to speak man to man, he began, his tone diplomatic, controlled. I could practically hear the legal department sitting behind him, nodding silently. All right, I replied, walking to the living room window. I'm listening. This situation with your departure, it's escalating more than we anticipated. I didn't escalate anything. That's not what I meant. He cleared his throat. You've built strong relationships over the years, and we recognize that. But the client shifts we've seen recently are the result of trust, I cut in. Trust you let your head of people publicly destroy. He was quiet for a beat. Then he continued, measured. We'd like to offer you a revised package. New title. Senior partner. Equity. Full reinstatement. We can undo what was done. I almost laughed. Not out of disrespect, but disbelief. The man who once told a boardroom that I was foundational, but not irreplaceable, now wanted to reverse course because he finally understood that foundation didn't mean invisible. It meant essential. You're too late, I said. Think about your family, he said softly. I looked down the hallway, where Lucas's nightlight glowed under the doorframe. I replied. I thought about my son asking why his mother yelled at me in front of the entire staff. I thought about the mornings he saw me leave before sunrise and come back after dark. I thought about the way he stopped drawing me in family portraits because I was always at work. Marcus, I gave everything to Silvera, I continued. I built departments from scratch, held clients when your systems were failing, brought in the kinds of contracts that paid for Karina's entire HR restructuring. And when I needed dignity, just dignity, you gave me silence. Until the numbers dropped. We didn't realize. You didn't care, I said, sharper now. And now that the market's reacting, I'm suddenly valuable again? That's not how it works. There was a long pause on the other end. Then, finally, is there anything we can say to make this right? I looked out the window, watching the streetlights flicker across the pavement. I thought about the peace I'd felt walking into Courtney's each day. The respect in Jared's voice when he asked for my opinion. The way my calendar finally had room for my son. I thought about the meetings I'd had that week alone. 7 clients already transitioning. For more reviewing proposals. The new team I was mentoring, people who looked at me not as a relic, but as a leader. And I thought about Karina, who hadn't reached out once. Not to apologize. Not to explain. Not even to argue. You can't make it right, I said. Because you let it go too far. And the worst part is, you probably still don't understand what you let her do to me. You didn't lose a name. You lost the one person who never asked for the spotlight, but held your brand together when everything else cracked. Another pause. But this one had weight. I see, he finally said. No, Harlan. That's the problem. You never did. I ended the call. I stood there in the quiet, the silence thick around me, the finality of that conversation ringing louder than anything he'd said. I wasn't angry. Not anymore. That part had burned away weeks ago. What I felt now was something cleaner. Stronger. Closure. That night, I walked into Lucas's room. He was half awake, curled in a messy tangle of sheets, his mouth slightly open. I sat on the edge of the bed, brushing a hand through his hair. You won't have to ask me to be home anymore, I whispered. I'm already here. The next morning, I opened my email and typed one final message to Jared. Subject, full commitment. Harlan called. He offered everything. I turned it down. Let's move forward. Jared replied 2 minutes later. Then it's time to grow this thing. Full speed. And we did. 2 months had passed. The skyline outside my Courtney's office shimmered with late morning sun, the glass panels of neighboring towers casting reflections across my desk. I just wrapped up a call with Graywell International, our third successful transition in 6 weeks, when my assistant knocked gently on the glass. Marcus, there's a visitor. She doesn't have an appointment, but she said you'd want to see her. I didn't need to ask who. I stood, adjusted the cuff of my shirt. and walked out to the reception area. And there she was, Karina. She looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, but in presence. The steel-hard edges she once wore like armor were duller, and the confident tilt of her chin was now tinged with restraint. Her blazer was crisp, her heels sharp as ever, but there was a quiet unease in the way she held her purse close to her body, like it could shield her from what she'd come to face. She didn't smile. Neither did I. "Marcus," she said, her voice measured. "Karina, I was hoping we could talk. Privately." I nodded once, turned, and led her to my office. The door clicked shut behind us, sealing in a silence thick with everything we hadn't said in months. She glanced around the space, sleek, warm-toned, tastefully modern. A wall of floor-to-ceiling windows bathed the room in natural light, and behind my desk, the Cortnix logo gleamed against matte black. "This is nice," she said, forcing something close to polite. "Very you." I sat behind my desk and motioned for her to take the seat across from me. She did, folding her hands over her knee. Her eyes darted to the nameplate on my desk. Marcus Ellison, Vice President, Global Client Partnerships. Her jaw tightened. "You've turned half the market against me," she said, skipping the preamble. "No," I said calmly. "You did that yourself when you made a spectacle out of your husband in front of junior staff. I just left. I was doing my job. You were executing a performance," I said. "You didn't just cut my salary. You tried to humiliate me. And you made sure they all saw it." She shifted in her chair. "I didn't think it would unravel this way. That's the thing, Karina. You didn't think at all. You thought I'd take it like I always did. Quietly. With grace. You forgot I built Silver's backbone while you chased visibility. I never took credit for your work." "No, but you never shared it either." She looked down at her hands for a moment, gathering herself. "You were always consistent. Predictable. And you needed that. Until you didn't." Silence again. She looked up at me, the edge in her expression softening just slightly. "I came because I wanted to understand," she said. "Why you let it all go. Us. The company. Everything." I leaned forward, resting my arms on the desk. "I didn't let anything go, Karina. I just stopped holding things that were already breaking me." She blinked. "I fought for us," I continued. "For the company. For every meeting, every deal, every late night that I covered while you climbed. And you, somewhere along the way, stopped seeing me as a partner. I became convenient. Background. Replaceable. I was under pressure," she said quietly. "We all were. But pressure reveals character. And yours came out cold." Her gaze drifted toward the window. "Do you love what you're doing now?" I didn't hesitate. "I do." She nodded once, like she already knew the answer. "And Lucas?" she asked. "He sees me now," I said. "I'm home. I coach his team. He puts me in his drawings again." That hit her harder than anything else I'd said. "You know what he asked me last week?" I added. "Why didn't Mom ever clap when you came on stage at Career Day?" I didn't even know he noticed. But he did. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed. No defense. No explanation. "You're right," she said finally. "I stopped seeing you. Somewhere between my ambition and my control, I just assumed you'd never leave. And I told myself that made me strong. It made you blind." She nodded. Slowly. Then stood. "Well, you've made your point." I stood too. "I didn't ask you here." "I know," she said. "But I had to see it for myself. What you became when you stopped standing in my shadow." We locked eyes for a long moment. There was no hatred there. No venom. Just a mutual understanding that something had ended, and it wasn't temporary. "You were always meant for more," she whispered. I stepped back. "You just didn't want me to have it." She took a shaky breath and walked to the door. As her hand touched the knob, she turned once more. "Goodbye, Marcus. Goodbye, Karina." She left without another word. The door clicked shut behind her. I sat back down, the quiet settling around me. But this silence didn't ache. It didn't feel like a void. It felt earned. Peaceful. Right. And outside, the city continued to move, deals waiting, clients calling, my future wide open. She had walked into my office thinking I might look back. But I was already facing forward. A full year had passed. 12 months since I walked out of Silver Systems with a box in my hands and my reputation intact. 12 months since Karina's voice echoed through that glass-walled room, delivering a threat wrapped in corporate language. And now, sitting at the head of a wide walnut conference table in Cortnix's downtown headquarters, I realized something. I hadn't once looked back. Not out of stubbornness. Out of peace. "Final numbers from Q2, Jared said, sliding a folder across to me. We're up 27% over last year. That includes the Teltrix account, Graywell, Xylene, and now Enduratech. I opened the folder and let the numbers speak for themselves. Every name in that report had once been a silver client. Every deal was one I had either originated, nurtured, or saved when others had fumbled it. But I hadn't poached a single one. I hadn't needed to. Trust is gravity. It pulls the right people toward you once the mask slips from those they thought they could rely on. Maria now ran our partner analytics division. Devin led our compliance team. Both had followed me from Silvera. Not with bitterness, but with resolve. They saw what I had endured. They saw what Karina did. And when the opportunity came to build something different, something ethical and quietly powerful, they didn't hesitate. Cortenix hadn't just gained clients. It had gained culture. I closed the folder. Let's keep going. No press. No victory laps. Just results. Jared grinned. You ever gonna let yourself enjoy this? I'm enjoying it, I said. I just don't need to scream about it. Later that evening, I left the office while the sun still hung low over the skyline. My car was already idling in the underground lot, another silent courtesy from the assistant I once doubted I needed. I'd learned something in the last year. Freedom doesn't always come from revenge. Sometimes, it comes from routine. From walking into a place every day where you're respected, not questioned. From leaving early enough to make it home in time for dinner. Lucas was waiting in the kitchen when I walked in. Soccer cleats on the table, a half-eaten granola bar in his hand, and a grin smeared with peanut butter. Coach Ellison, he declared, we've got practice tomorrow. Wouldn't miss it, I said, ruffling his hair. He was taller now, more confident. And for the first time since the divorce papers had been quietly filed and finalized 6 months ago, I saw how much calmer he was. Less anxious. Less confused. The absence of tension in the house had made room for growth, and both of us. He ran off to get his ball from the yard, and I stepped out to the porch, phone in hand. An alert popped up on my screen. Silver stock down 17% following quarterly loss. HR department undergoing restructuring. There was a picture embedded in the article, Harlan looking stiff behind a podium, his tie slightly crooked, and beside him, an empty chair. Karina had stepped down a few months earlier, citing personal growth goals. Translation: she'd been pushed. The industry wasn't stupid. When 4 major clients walked within 90 days of my resignation, it raised eyebrows. When 2 of her own staff followed me to Cortenix, it raised questions. When the media caught wind of her HR decisions and the mysterious reclassification of her own husband, it became a liability. And me? I didn't comment. I didn't retaliate. I didn't even post a cryptic LinkedIn update. I just kept building. Because real payback isn't noisy. It's dignified. It's being so focused on what you're creating that you don't have time to burn down what you left behind. Dinner that night was simple: grilled chicken, roasted carrots, and a salad Lucas mostly picked around. We laughed about a joke his coach told, and when he went to bed, I sat by the window with a glass of wine and the soft buzz of contentment settling around me. I thought about everything Karina had once meant to me, everything we tried to build together, and how she had weaponized the very thing we created. But I also thought about what came after. The morning sun through Cortenix's floor-to-ceiling windows. The way Maria teared up during our team retreat when she said, "It's nice to work somewhere that feels human again." The late-night pitch meetings with Jared where we built strategies off instinct, not ego. The emails from clients who said, "We trust you to lead this." Karina's voice was gone from my life now. Her silence was louder than any apology would have been. But her absence didn't sting. It was a gift. Because the truth is, I didn't need her to fall for me to rise. I didn't need Silvera to burn to prove I'd been fire all along. I just needed to walk away and remember who I was before I started shrinking to fit her spotlight. I took a final sip of wine and looked out at the stars peeking through the dark. Then I picked up my phone and opened a blank note. Reminder to self. Leadership isn't loud. Dignity doesn't beg. Loyalty, when abused, becomes clarity. Trust will follow the person, not the brand. The best payback is peace. I closed the phone, set it on the table, and turned off the lights. Tomorrow would come. And I was ready.